Chapter 1876. Self-detonation. The sixth sword was the blood-splashing 5 steps ultimate sword. It was also a sword strike that risked one's life. Back then, the demigod Zhang Bai had risked his life to unleash the sixth sword. He had even managed to injure heavenly god Gonggu, who was an entire realm lower than him. This sword strike was enough to kill any cultivator below the heavenly god realm. The moment Zhuowen unleashed the sixth sword, he had imbued it with his second-level Dao intent. Zhuowen's sixth sword was much more powerful than Zhang Bai's sixth sword. This sword strike could even kill a heavenly god. Although Yang Yi's strength appeared to be at the peak of the demigod realm, Zhuowen had a strange feeling. Yang Yi's speed was mysterious and unpredictable. Moreover, he had never displayed his true strength. Jian Wushuang guessed that Yang Yi's true strength should be at the heavenly god realm. His strength might even be above Hou Zhu and heavenly god Gonggu. Therefore, the moment Yang Yi attacked, Jian Wushuang did not hesitate to unleash the blood-splashing 5 steps sixth sword. The blurry figure opened a pair of blurry eyes and stared coldly at Yang Yi below. An unimaginable pressure surged out from the pair of blurry eyes and pressed down on Yang Yi's body. Clang! The blurry figure slashed the illusory iron sword at Yang Yi's head. When the sword slashed down, Yang Yi's head would fall to the ground. Not far away, in an independent space, countless black fog condensed into Hou Zhu's figure. At this moment, Hou Zhu noticed the illusory iron sword slashing down from the blurry figure. His face was as pale as snow. The pressure from the illusory iron sword was too terrifying. He did not even dare to take the initiative to face the illusory iron sword. He knew very well that if he were to face the illusory iron sword, he would die without a doubt. How did this kid have such a powerful trump card? Hou Zhu looked at Zhuowen with lingering fear. His eyes were filled with dread. Even though Zhuowen was in a very bad state, his body was covered with countless cracks. Blood was spurting out from his body. His vitality was fading with time. However, Master Devourer still didn't dare to underestimate Zhuowen. Just the blood-splashing 5 steps sixth sword was enough to annihilate him. If Zhuowen had used this sword earlier, he would have died without a doubt. I wonder if Yang Yi can withstand this sword? Master Shi muttered as his gaze landed on Yang Yi, who had been forced out of the spatial passageway by the powerful sword intent. Yang Yi's eyes were gloomy. He looked up at the iron sword shadow that was descending and coldly snorted, "What a troublesome fellow. He actually wants to drag me down with him even if he has to risk his life?" As he spoke, Yang Yi formed a sword with his right hand and drew a circle in a clockwise direction in front of him. Then, the circle that Yang Yi drew suddenly collapsed, and the terrifying power of the void reassembled, forming a huge black halberd that was several feet long. Halberd rend. Yang Yi's eyes were cold as he threw out the black halberd. Wherever the halberd passed, the surrounding void seemed to be squeezed and exploded. As the black halberd passed through the void, it formed a huge void gully. Its power was shocking to the eyes. Bang! The black halberd was indeed terrifying. However, the blurry figure's eyes were still cold. The iron sword shadow stood on top of the black halberd without any hesitation. Soon after, the large black halberd with an imposing aura was hacked into countless black powder by the illusory metal sword. However, the blurry figure's body also shook violently under this terrifying impact. Zhuo Wenming could clearly see that the blurry figure had become extremely dim under the impact. Obviously, although the blurry figure had gained the upper hand in this collision, he had also paid a huge price. However, Yun couldn't care less about all of this. Now, 90% of his body was cracked, and he was like a human-shaped ceramic that was about to break. The remaining power of Zhangjie in Zhuowen's body had completely disappeared. Zhuowen's life was also gradually fading away along with the disappearance of Zhangjie's power. Before I die, I hope that the blood-splashing 5 steps sixth sword can completely kill Yang Yi. Zhuowen turned his head with difficulty and stared at the already dim and blurry figure in the sky. Once again he swung his iron sword. This time, the sword ruthlessly slashed at Yang Yi's body, causing a terrifying sword light to erupt. However, soon, Yun found that the terrifying sword light began to shrink at the moment of explosion. Finally, It shrank into a tiny light spot and disappeared. The moment the sword light disappeared, Yang Yi's embarrassed figure slowly walked out from the other side of the sword light. At this moment, Yang Yi's eyes were gloomy. His clothes were in a mess and he looked like a beggar. Your sixth sword is very powerful. Unfortunately, it's a bit difficult to kill me. Yang Yi's eyes fell on Zhuan. A killing intent slowly spread out from his body. His aura was increasing layer by layer. In an instant he broke through the early divine realm. Then, it continued to increase until it reached the middle divine realm. Finally, it stopped at the late divine realm. Originally, I had hidden my cultivation deep enough. Unfortunately, I was forced to reveal my true form by your sixth sword. This really pisses me off. Yang Yi said coldly. Not far away, Hou Zhu's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Late divine realm? You've been hiding your strength all this time?" Yang didn't even look at Hou Zhu. Instead, he stared at Zhuan below and said, "You're the first person who has angered me. Although you'll definitely die even if I don't do anything, I still want to kill you with my own hands." Having said that, Yang Yi took a step forward and slowly walked towards Zhuan. With every step he took, the space beneath his feet seemed to shrink. It was extremely strange. At this moment, Zhuan was powerless and couldn't move. He calmly stared at Yang Yi, who was walking towards him. He didn't feel any fear. Yang Yi also calmly stared at Zhuan. He clenched his right hand and the void exploded, forming a huge void halberd. Holding the void halberd, Yang Yi went straight for Zhuan's chest, hoping to kill him with a single strike. Unfortunately, at the instant Yang Yi's halberd was about to pierce Zhuan's heart, a black shadow had unknowingly flashed in front of Zhuan. "Zhuan, run." The appearance of the black shadow was out of Zhuan and Yang Yi's expectations. When Zhuan heard the black shadow's words, he felt a powerful force coming from his body. Then he was sent flying by the force. The moment he was sent flying, Zhuan turned his head with difficulty. With reddened eyes, he saw that the black shadow was none other than Fuxi. At this moment, Fuxi was surrounded by 4 tomb guards. These 4 tomb guards were Dongfang, Nangong, Shimin, and Beichen, the 4 true immortals who had protected Fuxi for 10,000 years. The 4 tomb guards formed an impenetrable stone shield in front of Fuxi. For a moment, they blocked Yang Yi's attack. "Dongfang, Nangong, Shimin, and Beichen, I'm truly sorry for dragging you 4 into this battle." Fuxi looked bitterly at the 4 coffins embedded in the stone shield. "Milord, why care about this? If you hadn't taken us in, we would have been dead long ago. Our lives were given to us by you, milord. Why are you being so courteous?" Dongfang giggled. Beichen's cold voice sounded, "Dongfang is right. You're being too courteous. Our lives were given to us by you, milord. It's our duty to live and die with you." "I'll listen to everything you say, Beichen," Shimin's simple and honest voice sounded. Nangong said elegantly, "There are things a gentleman should do and things he shouldn't do. Repaying kindness is something a gentleman must do." Fuxi's eyes turned red when he heard the 4's words. However, there was nothing he could do. If he didn't rely on the power of the 4 true immortal Dao soldiers, it would be impossible for him to resist the late-stage Empyrean god Yang Yi. "You overestimate yourselves." Yang Yi's eyes were cold. He held the halberd in his hand and spun it. The halberd spun violently, creating a terrifying void wind. Under Yang Yi's control, the tip of the halberd smashed into the stone shield. Then the stone shield completely collapsed. The 4 bronze coffins embedded in the 4 corners of the stone shield flew out and opened their lids. 4 mighty figures flew out from within. These 4 were naturally Dongfang, Nangong, Shimin, and Beichen. "Milord will go first." The 4 looked deeply at Fuxi behind them. Then, their auras suddenly exploded. This explosion was in a short period of time, increasing by hundreds and thousands. It was as if there was a ball of fire burning in their bodies. "Burning your primordial spirits? You're just 4 pieces of trash. What's the point of burning your primordial spirits?" Yang Yi's pupils shrank. Then, with a cold smile, he swung the halberd in his right hand forward. Instantly, Countless halberd shadows enveloped the four like a dense rain. Explode! The four of them looked determined. The moment the halberd shadows enveloped them, they detonated their primordial spirits one after another. 4 terrifying explosions resounded, and 4 terrifying mushroom clouds rose in the starry sky. Yang Yi did not expect that the 4 of them would so decisively self-detonate their primordial spirits. For a moment, he was caught off guard. The shockwave of the 4 primordial spirits' self-detonation broke through the halberd shadows and blasted in front of him. Dang dang dang! Yang Yi let out a muffled groan and involuntarily retreated. He gloomily stared at the mushroom cloud caused by the explosion of the 4 nascent divinities with an extremely angry expression. However, before he could regain his senses, a black figure suddenly descended from the sky. Moreover, as the black shadow continued to approach, its aura grew at a rapid rate. This growth was even more terrifying than that of the 4 people from the east. Yang Yi, even if I die, I'll take you down with me. Fushi's eyes were calm as he stared at Yang Yi, who was getting closer and closer. His primordial spirit was burning, causing his body to erupt with a dazzling light like the sun. Yang Yi wanted to escape, but Fushi, as a demigod, burned all the power of his primordial spirit in his body. In an instant, a terrifying power comparable to that of a divine realm expert erupted. It was like a heavy mountain pressing down on Yang Yi, making it difficult for him to move. Bang! Another huge explosion resounded. Fushi had paid the price of burning his primordial spirit to completely detonate himself. The terrifying and brilliant explosion completely filled the surroundings. Chapter 1877. The power of space-time. Looking at the terrifying explosion, there was no joy in Zhuo Wen's eyes. Instead, they were filled with sorrow. He knew very well that no matter what happened to Yang Yi, Fushi, Dongfang, Shimin, Nangong, and Beichen, the 4 true immortals had all sacrificed themselves. Moreover, Tuan had watched the 5 of them die before his eyes. At this moment, Zhuo Wen's heart was filled with a sense of powerlessness. I'm dead, but I can't accept it. Tuan only felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier. He could clearly feel the vitality in his body gradually fading away. He knew that he was not far from death. The moment his eyelids were about to close, he saw a black shadow appear in front of him. This black shadow was dressed in a black robe, and his eyes were filled with coldness. He stared at Tuan, whose vitality was constantly fading away, and sighed softly. I originally thought that this thing that Lord Songjie gave me would not be used. I didn't expect that I would have to use it in the end. First mountain god, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He only felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier. The moment his eyelids completely closed, he clearly saw that the first mountain god had taken out a black crystal at some point in time. Tuan, comprehend the laws of the last 2 forbidden areas of the Blue Dragon Hall's 3rd layer, the 19th mountain. As he spoke, the first mountain god slowly pressed the black crystal into Zhuowen's glabella. Suddenly, a black light burst out from Zhuowen's glabella. This black light split into thousands of black threads and wrapped around Zhuowen layer by layer. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He saw a blue sky and an endless sea under the sky, and he was standing on the shore of the sea. Deep behind the shore, there was a mountain that reached the sky. This is the 19th mountain? Staring at the mountain behind him, Zhuowen's eyes became clear. Because he had used the 6th sword of the blood-splashing 5 steps, his vitality was gradually fading away. He should have died. But now, he had appeared in the 19th mountain of the Azure Dragon Palace's 3rd heaven. Soon, Zhuowen recalled the moment he closed his eyes and saw the first mountain god stuffing a black crystal into his forehead. The last words of the first mountain god still lingered in his mind. Comprehend the laws of the last 2 forbidden lands? But is it too late now? Zhuowen's mouth was filled with bitterness. Now that the battle was imminent, although Yang Yi had been stopped by the self-detonation of Fushi and the 4 true immortal Dao soldiers, it was still uncertain whether or not he would perish. Moreover, other than Yang Yi, there was also that master devourer who was eyeing him covetously. How could he possibly have the time to comprehend the last 2 laws of the so-called forbidden area? However, when Zhuan planned to use the usual method to control the Azure Dragon Hall and release him, he discovered that it was useless. He was still on the shore of the 19th mountain. After trying many times, Zhuan found that the results were the same. Finally, he gave up and looked at the 19th mountain. Looks like I can only enter the forbidden area of the 19th mountain to take a look. Zhuan sighed softly and slowly stepped into the 19th mountain. He had previously comprehended the first 4 of the 6 forbidden areas of the 19th mountain, so it didn't take him too long to pass through the first 4 and arrive at the entrance of the 5th forbidden area. Let's go in. Zhuan sighed softly. Since he couldn't leave, the only thing he could do now was to follow the first mountain god's instructions and comprehend the laws of space and time in the last 2 forbidden areas. Within the 5th forbidden area, there was nothing at all. The only thing that existed was endless space. This forbidden area was filled with countless small spaces in different directions. These small spaces were like the inside of a kaleidoscope, causing one to lose all sense of direction when looking at them. Zhuan stared silently at the countless small spaces around him. He was shocked to discover that these small spaces actually had clear lines in his eyes, without any sense of complexity. At the same time, a wisp of black light suddenly shot out from Zhuan's forehead. This wisp of black light wriggled and formed a black crystal. The moment the black crystal formed, the countless small spaces around it suddenly collapsed, turning into fragments of Daokong and entering the black crystal. After absorbing the countless space fragments, the black crystal returned to the deepest part of Zhuan's forehead. Zhuan discovered that he now had an extremely deep understanding of space. He only needed to wave his hand gently, and he could completely freeze the space within 100,000 feet, or even several 100,000 feet, or even several million feet. I comprehended the laws of space? Zhuan's eyes were fixed on his hands. His face was filled with astonishment and disbelief. However, when he came back to his senses, he quickly thought of the black crystal that shot out from between his brows. He knew that the reason why he could comprehend the laws of space so quickly was probably closely related to the black crystal. Perhaps I really can comprehend the laws of space and time consecutively, and merge them into a wisp of the power of space-time. Zhuan revealed an excited expression, and then slowly walked towards the entrance of the 6th forbidden area. The 6th forbidden area was a desolate place. The only thing that existed in this desolate place was a dilapidated temple. The temple was made of yellow soil, and the surroundings of the temple were boundless desert. It was completely golden and boundless. Zhuan looked at the dilapidated temple. Afterwards, he discovered that the temple was constantly changing. The dilapidated temple rapidly became glossy and new, no longer giving off an aura of decay. In Zhuan's eyes, it was like time had reversed to countless years ago, when the temple was still complete. Time continued to reverse. The temple gradually disappeared, and humans constantly appeared. Afterwards, the humans disappeared, and everything disappeared. It was like they had returned to the beginning, and this place had become a desolate place once again. However, there was nothing in this desolate place, not even the dilapidated temple. There was only a dry, barren land. The end of time is the starting point. Everything will obtain the truth from the beginning, and time is the same. Zhuan's eyes shone with understanding. The black crystal between his eyebrows shot out again, absorbing all the laws of time there. Zhuan gently held the black crystal in his right hand. At that moment, the black crystal in his eyes was no longer ordinary. He could clearly sense that the laws of time and space within the crystal were intertwining with each other, as if they were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. The intertwining only lasted for a short while before the 2 laws completely fused together. Bang! The black crystal shattered, and a thumb-sized bolt of purplish-black lightning shot out. As soon as the purplish-black lightning appeared, the entire sky changed. Black clouds constantly swirled and sank, and countless bolts of lightning wreaked havoc, as if they were welcoming and worshipping the purplish-black lightning. Zhuan's eyes narrowed. He could sense that the purplish-black lightning contained an unbelievable amount of space-time force. Aside from that, he discovered that apart from the space-time force, he could also sense the sharp aura that he had sensed from the mysterious eyeball in the purplish-black lightning. He had an extremely deep impression of the sharp aura. After all, the black lightning in the mysterious eyeball had saved him several times, so he obviously could not forget it. Swoosh. The moment the aura shot out, the black eyeball that had been hiding in his collar suddenly shot out, revealing an extremely excited glow in its eyes. The mysterious eyeball shot out, and as soon as it opened its eyes, the black lightning shot out, turning into a sharp mouth that swallowed the purplish-black lightning. Unfortunately, the moment the mouth formed by the black lightning got close to the purplish-black lightning, it instantly collapsed. What was even more incredible was that after the purplish-black lightning shattered the black lightning, it shot out and directly enveloped the mysterious eyeball. This, being enveloped by the purplish-black lightning, completely triggered the fear in the mysterious eyeball. The mysterious eyeball continued to release black lightning, trying to blast away the purplish-black lightning's encirclement. Unfortunately, it was of no use. Moreover, Yuan discovered that the purplish-black lightning wrapped around the mysterious eyeball was rushing towards his forehead, which shocked him. However, before he could completely react, the purplish-black lightning instantly entered his forehead, and the mysterious eyeball was brought into Zhuowen's forehead by the purplish-black lightning. Zhuan only felt a pain in his forehead, and he was shocked to discover that the purplish-black lightning was raging in his sea of consciousness. In an instant, countless purplish-black electric threads were scattered around his sea of consciousness. These purplish-black electric threads were like branches and meridians, rooted in the deepest part of his sea of consciousness, and at the tip of the purplish-black electric threads was the mysterious eyeball. At this moment, even though the mysterious eyeball was constantly struggling, it still could not escape the shackles of the purplish-black electric threads. It could only watch as the purplish-black electric threads took root in the depths of Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. The process of the purplish-black electric threads taking root in his sea of consciousness was extremely painful. Yuan only felt a splitting headache, as if his head had split open, and he was banging his head on the ground. This kind of pain lasted for only 1 hour, and then it disappeared completely. Zhuan also found that the mysterious eyeball attached to his forehead gave him a feeling of a blood connection. Kid, this is Devour's most important heaven-devouring eye. That year, this heaven-devouring eye was taken away by God Ganj, and it was sealed together with him. However, back then, before this eye was sealed, I had already done something to it. It was also the final trump card I left behind. This trump card was prepared for the worst possible outcome. A helpless voice slowly arose in Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen immediately recognized that it was Cangjia's voice. If I use this trick, it means that I'm dead, and the strongest parasite in Devour's body has completely controlled me. It also means that God Ganj has been released. The heavenly armor continent has come to its end. I'll leave the rest to you. Song Long will help you. The voice slowly faded away. At the same time, the heaven-devouring eye in Zhuowen's glabella cracked open, and a powerful devouring power gushed out from the eye. The enormous 19th mountain was swallowed by the powerful devouring power of the heaven-devouring eye. A massive anti-clockwise vortex appeared under the 19th mountain. A massive bronze coffin floated in the vortex. Clang clang. The bronze coffin opened, and a figure walked out. Chapter 1878. Song Long Taoist Priest. The figure who walked out of the bronze coffin was wearing a green Taoist robe. His hair was tied up in a bun, and he held a white horsetail whisk in his hand. He looked like an immortal. Zhuan was no stranger to this middle-aged man who looked like a Taoist priest. He was the master of the Azure Dragon Hall, Song Long Taoist. Zhuan did not expect Song Long Taoist to be alive in the Azure Dragon Hall. What was even more unbelievable was that Song Long Taoist had been suppressed under the 19th mountain. After comprehending the laws of the 6 forbidden areas of the 19th mountain, the 19th mountain was actually devoured by the eye of heaven devouring. Zhuo Wen's gaze landed on Taoist master Song Long, who had shot out from the bronze coffin, as a contemplative look appeared in his eyes. He clearly remembered that the first mountain god had said that if he could comprehend the laws of the 6 great forbidden areas of the 19th mountain, then the first mountain god would completely break free from the shackles of the Azure Dragon Hall. However, now that he had comprehended 6 laws of the 6 forbidden areas of the 19th mountain, Song Long Taoist, the master of the Azure Dragon Hall, had walked out of the 19th mountain. Back then, the first mountain god had clearly said that Song Long Taoist was his mortal enemy. Now he had followed the first mountain god's instructions and released Song Long Taoist. All of this confused Zhuan. However, after thinking about it carefully, Zhuan seemed to understand something. Memory-splitting technique, Zhuan muttered in a low voice. He thought of his perfect holy body clone and spiritual power clone. These two clones had been separated from his original body after he had cultivated the spirit clone Duan Yi. Moreover, the two clones did not affect each other, but they were of the same origin. He could permanently separate the two clones or merge them into one to increase his strength. The memory-splitting technique was a strange, secret technique that the first mountain god had taught him. He had already suspected why the first mountain god did not cultivate the memory-splitting technique. However, because the first mountain god had only cultivated his physical body with the characteristics of the memory-splitting technique, even if the first mountain god had cultivated it, it would be difficult for him to separate clones with different characteristics. But now, Zhuan could vaguely guess that it was not that the first mountain god did not cultivate the soul-splitting technique, but that the first mountain god was a doppelganger created by the Song Long Taoist after he cultivated the soul-splitting technique. Back then, the reason why the first mountain god allowed him to comprehend the laws of the 6 great forbidden lands was most likely not to release him, but to release his original body, the Azure Dragon Taoist. Taoist Song Long slowly turned his head, smiled at Zhuan and said, "Tin, you don't seem very surprised to see me." Zhuan raised his head to look at Taoist Song Long and said in a deep voice, "Mind-splitting secret technique?" Taoist Master Song Long took a deep look at Zhuan. He was not too surprised and continued, "It seems that you have guessed it. The first mountain god is indeed my clone." "Then why did you lie to me back then?" Zhuan asked calmly. Taoist Master Song Long smiled and said, "Because the time was not right. It was really inappropriate to let you know the identity of the first mountain god in advance." Speaking of this, Taoist Master Song Long revealed a bitter smile and said, "It seems that Brother Songjia really gave you the origin black crystal. Does this mean that Brother Songjia has fallen?" Zhuan looked at Taoist Master Song Long silently and did not answer. There were some things that Taoist Master Song Long should know without him saying. After all, the first mountain god was his doppelganger. Taoist Master Song Long should know about Songjia's situation. "Can you help me defeat Yang Yi?" Zhuan asked in a deep voice. Taoist Master Song Long took a deep look at Zhuan, shook his head and said, "Yang Yi has already exceeded Brother Songjia's and my expectations. The worst plan we made was that the strongest parasite in Devour's body would seize Brother Songjia's body and absorb Devour's power to become a divine realm expert. It's just as you've seen. Devouring its master means devouring its queen, causing its strength to leap to the early stage of the heavenly god realm. That's the worst outcome we've achieved back then. If that's all, I'll be able to deal with it. But now, Yang Yi, who came out of nowhere, has the terrifying cultivation of the late stage of the divine realm. Such an expert is enough to destroy our heavenly armor star. He is many times more powerful than Devour's master. When my original body and my doppelganger combine, I will break through to the divine realm. However, I will only be at the early stage of the divine realm. I will not be Yang Yi's opponent at all." Speaking of this, Taoist Master Song Long looked at Zhuan, his eyes full of hope. He continued, "But you are different. Yang Yi is an accident that Brother Songjia and I did not expect, but you are also out of our expectations. You have comprehended Tao meaning and raised it to level 2. In other words, if your cultivation can be raised to the early stage of the divine realm, you will be able to fight Yang Yi." Zhuan's eyes narrowed. He did not deny Taoist Master Song Long's words. With the support of level 2 Tao meaning, if the strength of an early stage of the divine realm was doubled, it was indeed possible for him to fight a late stage of the divine realm. However, Zhuan's current cultivation was too weak. He was only at the late stage of the divine realm, which was still a distance away from the peak of the divine realm. His previous cultivation of the demigod realm was forcibly raised by Songjia's power. It was extremely difficult for him to raise his cultivation to the divine realm because of this. Taoist Master Zonglong also saw the difficult expression in Zhuowen's eyes. He suddenly smiled and said, I know what you are worried about. I have a way to raise your strength to the early stage of the divine realm in a short time, but the price is very high. Speaking of this, Taoist Master Zonglong suddenly knelt on one knee and bowed to Zhuowen with great respect. He pleaded, My strength is not enough. Only you, who have comprehended level 2 Dao meaning, can contend against Yang Yi. Seeing that you are a citizen of the heavenly armor continent, can you help me this time? Zhuowen helped Taoist Master Zonglong up. In his mind, he thought of Fuxi, Dongfang, Beichen, and the other 4 who did not hesitate to self-detonate to stop Yang. He was deeply touched. Senior Zonglong, even if you don't ask, I will do my best. The heavenly armor continent is not only your hometown, it is also my hometown. My family and friends are also there. I am duty-bound to protect the heavenly armor continent. Zhuowen sighed and continued, If Senior really has a way to raise my strength to the early stage of the divine realm, Junior will not hesitate to pay any price. Taoist Master Zonglong revealed a gratified expression and then slowly walked to Zhuowen's side. Senior, you... Only now did Zhuowen see clearly that although Taoist Master Zonglong's aura was as vast as the ocean, his body actually looked somewhat illusory, as if he did not have a physical body. This old man's physical body had already collapsed in the great battle 10,000 years ago. Relying on the first mountain god avatar derived from Duan Yi and the uniqueness of the Azure Dragon Palace's third heaven, the 19th mountain, this old man's soul was suppressed in the 19th mountain to recuperate. Once someone comprehends the 6 great laws that I set up in the 6th forbidden area of the 19th mountain, my soul will be transformed into a divine soul. Originally, I planned to transform my soul into a divine soul. When the first mountain god's physical body reached the divine body realm, I would combine the two and finally reach the divine realm. Moreover, I would not be an ordinary divine realm expert. I would be able to fight against a mid-divine realm expert as soon as I reached the early stage of the divine realm. Unfortunately, the plan could not keep up with the changes. Whether it was the soul or the physical body, it did not achieve the expected plan. Moreover, the war between Devour and the divine realm appeared in advance. If Brother Tsongjie had not given you the origin black crystal, my soul would have been successfully promoted to the divine soul realm. If Yang Yi did not exist, I could also carry my divine soul on my perfect divine body and forcibly promote it to the early stage of the divine realm. Although it would not be perfect, it would not be much weaker than the early stage of the divine realm. It would be enough to resist the invasion of Devour. However, Yang Yi was too strong. Even if my divine soul and divine body combined, it was still impossible for me to be Yang Yi's opponent. Therefore, I placed all my hopes on you. The early stage of the divine realm with the support of the second Dao meaning is enough to rival a late divine realm expert. At this point, Taoist Master Zonglong's mouth was full of a smile. It was an extremely carefree smile. However, Zhuowen had a trace of ominous feeling in his heart. However, before Zhuowen could say anything, Taoist Master Zonglong waved his sleeve and pointed his right finger at the space between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Zhuowen wanted to dodge, but he discovered that the speed of Taoist Master Zonglong's right finger was too fast. Moreover, his surroundings were filled with an extremely surging shackling force, causing him to be utterly unable to dodge. Bang! When Taoist Master Zonglong's right finger completely touched Zhuowen's forehead, an extremely surging force poured into Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. This force was extremely strange. When this force entered Zhuowen's sea of consciousness, Zhuowen found that his sea of consciousness was undergoing an extremely strange transformation. Under the transformation of this force, his sea of consciousness gradually dried up, revealing the chapped riverbed below the surface of the sea. When the last drop of seawater evaporated, the chapped riverbed collapsed inch by inch into nothingness. Then, Zhuowen found that his sea of consciousness had become a space of nothingness. Moreover, as this force continued to enter, the space of nothingness began to be filled with bits of starlight. The starlight became denser and denser. Under the embellishment of the starlight, this dark space of nothingness became a galaxy of countless twinkling stars. This galaxy was extremely large, many times larger than the sea of consciousness that was previously filled with seawater. 1. This is the divine soul. Only after you have advanced to the divine transformation realm will your sea of consciousness completely transform into a divine soul. The divine soul is very large, like the boundless starry sky, as far as the eye can see. This is the only thing I can do for you. When Zhuowen's sea of consciousness completely transformed into a divine soul, Taoist Master Zonglong's voice slowly rang in Zhuowen's mind. However, this voice revealed a trace of exhaustion and relief. At this moment, the first mountain god outside was holding the Azure Dragon Hall in his hand. When Taoist Master Zonglong completely helped Zhuowen develop his divine soul, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the Azure Dragon Hall, and finally shattered into countless light spots. These light spots were like armor, densely covering the surface of the first mountain god's body, forming a dazzling and terrifying light robe. Chapter 1879. True appearance. At the cost of breaking the Azure Dragon Hall, although my perfect holy body couldn't reach the divine body realm, it has reached the demigod body. With the demigod body, it should be able to withstand the star god power of the heavenly armor star and the divine soul, the first mountain god murmured. The first mountain god mumbled softly. He glanced at the unconscious Zhuowen beside him, and a look of contemplation appeared on his face. The moment the Azure Dragon Hall shattered, Zhuowen's figure had already appeared. The life force that was gradually disappearing from Zhuowen's body was also slowly recovering. The first mountain god knew that the recovery of Zhuowen's vitality had a lot to do with the Tsang Dragon Taoists sealed in the 19th mountain. With a sigh, the first mountain god took a step forward. Like a stream of light, he entered the heavenly armor star. The heavenly armor star was created mainly because of Devour. It could be said that the heavenly armor star didn't have a star core, but the adult Devourer acted as the star core. Now, the adult Devourer was devoured by the strongest parasite and became the master Devourer. The energy of the heavenly armor star suddenly became much thinner. However, the adult Devourer had existed in the heavenly armor star for countless years, so the energy remaining in the heavenly armor star was probably much denser than that of an ordinary planet. The heaven-devouring eye in Zhuowen's body was the most important part of the adult Devourer. It contained a trace of Devour's origin. Songjie had wanted the heaven-devouring eye for a long time. After all, the heaven-devouring eye contained Devour's aura, and the heavenly armor star was created because of the adult Devourer. Therefore, the heaven-devouring eye could be used as a substitute for the heavenly armor star's core. This was the last trick that Songjie had arranged in the mysterious eyeball. In order to become a divine god, one had to refine a planet and combine the energy of the planet with the transformed divine soul to form the powerful star god power. The star god power was the energy of an entire planet. Whether in terms of quality or quantity, it was much more powerful than the so-called immortal power. If Songjie, Chao Yu and Zhanbi had not used the power of the heavenly armor star and gathered the power of all the sages on the continent, it would have been impossible for them to fight against the gods of divine realm. Now, the first mountain god could clearly sense that Zhuowen's sea of consciousness had completely transformed into a divine soul, and the heavenly devouring eye between Zhuowen's eyebrows had already opened. He already knew the decision Taoist Zonglong had made. Although he was a clone of the Zonglong Taoist, he had been separated from the Zonglong Taoist for too long. Therefore, in the long years, the first mountain god had also developed an independent personality with his own thoughts and emotions. Even if he had his own personality, a doppelganger was still a doppelganger. He would still be affected by the main body. In the 10,000 years that the Zonglong Taoist divine soul had been suppressed in the 19th mountain, the first mountain god was not affected by the main body. However, the moment that Zonglong Taoist's divine soul left the 19th mountain, he felt an indisputable intent. This intent belonged to the main body. Although I'm not happy that I've done all the work for others, this is the intent of the main body. Moreover, Nguyen has comprehended the second level of Tao meaning and is indeed the best candidate. However, I'm still not happy. The first mountain god was extremely fast. The moment he entered the heavenly armor star, he took a deep look at Zhuan, who was floating in the starry sky, and muttered to himself. After the first mountain god had completely disappeared into the heavenly armor planet, Yang Yi was still trapped in the self-destruct cluster of Fuxi and the other four. He had not completely escaped, but everyone could clearly feel that the terrifying explosion cluster was shrinking. There was no doubt that Yang Yi, who was inside the explosion, was not affected too much. With the speed at which the explosion was shrinking, it would not take long for it to completely shrink and be annihilated. At this moment, Master Devourer, who was not far away, had completely gathered his scattered body parts back together and formed a complete body. However, Master Devourer's body was trembling slightly. It was obvious that he had paid a great price to gather his scattered body parts back together. At the very least, Master Devourer was not in a good state. "Zhuan, you little bastard. You've put me in such a miserable state. I won't let you die so easily." Master Devourer's eyes revealed a ferocious expression when he saw Zhuan floating in the starry sky without moving at all with his eyes closed. He stomped his right foot and shot forward like an arrow leaving a bow. He shot straight toward Zhuan. "Oh no!" On the Luo Yen whale, the beautiful eyes of the black-veiled lady changed slightly. She had been paying attention to Zhuan all this time. When she saw that Zhuan's vitality was gradually recovering, she heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that Master Devourer intended to kill Zhuan while Zhuan was unconscious, the black-veiled lady's beautiful eyes changed greatly. Without any hesitation, she commanded the Luo Yen whale to rush toward Zhuan. As the Luo Yen whale was closer to Zhuan, although its speed was much slower than Master Devourer's, it was still one step ahead of Master Devourer and carried the unconscious Zhuan. Then, it fled towards the distant starry sky without stopping. Unfortunately, Master Devourer caught up with the Luo Yen whale not long after it fled. "Snatching food from the tiger's mouth? You're overestimating yourself." Master Devourer sneered coldly. He grabbed forward with his right hand. The devouring power, which was mixed with the law of heaven and earth, condensed into a huge hand. It pressed down from the starry sky and slammed heavily on the Luo Yen whale. The black-veiled lady clenched her teeth and formed a seal with both of her hands. She commanded the Luo Yen whale to spurt out thick Luo Yen fog, which formed a tortoise shell on the surface of the whale. Unfortunately, the Luo Yen fog's defense was like an empty shell in front of the huge hand. It broke upon contact. The black-veiled lady spat out a mouthful of blood. The Luo Yen whale was thrown out by the huge force of the huge hand like a piece of trash. It flew backward for a long distance in the starry sky before it managed to stop. The countless creatures in the Luo Yen whale's inner world were shaking violently as if the end of the world had arrived. All of them were terrified. "Die!" The moment the Luo Yen whale stopped moving, Master Devourer's attack continued. The huge hand was like a mountain and continued to attack the Luo Yen whale. This time, the power of the huge hand was many times stronger than before. Obviously, Master Devourer intended to kill the Luo Yen whale and the countless creatures in the Luo Yen whale with this move. What should we do? In the Luo Yen whale's inner world, Yuan Hongwen, Jiqian, Long Xiaotian, and countless other creatures looked up through the Luo Yen fog and stared at the huge hand that was getting closer and closer. Their faces were filled with despair. Master Devourer was too terrifying. It was a powerful existence at the early stage of the divine realm. Even though it had been severely injured by Zhuan, its strength was still far beyond that of a demigod. It was definitely not something that the Luo Yen whale and anyone else could contend against. Zhuan, whom everyone had placed their hopes on, was also in a coma at this moment. No one could think of anyone who could save them. The black-veiled lady clenched her jade-like hands tightly. Her nails dug deep into her palms and almost bled. She stared at the huge hand that was getting closer and closer. She was very clear that when the huge hand completely fell, she and the countless creatures in the Luo Yen whale would die. The black-veiled lady squatted down and gently stroked the face of Zhuan, who was lying beside her with her flawless jade-like hands. She sighed and said, I know that your heart is with elder sister Chen Shui, but sometimes, things like love can't be forgotten with time. It can't be forgotten just by turning around and leaving." I thought that the last song that I played before leaving could cut off the last tie between you and me. But time is like wine. The longer it is, the more mellow the wine of longing becomes. I can't forget you, so I entered the central region alone. I agreed to the conditions of the previous Luo Yen Whale Queen and entered the central region. I also obtained great power. I thought that I could help you, but now I find that I'm still useless. I still can't help you. Speaking of this, the black-veiled lady slowly removed the veil on her face. She stared at Zhuowen's face and sparkling tears fell. She cried with a smile, "If I die, will you remember me? Will you miss me? Or will you still treat me as a passerby in your life? No matter what you treat me as, I don't want you to die. You have to continue living. I believe that you will definitely save elder sister Chen Shui and reunite with her. I will completely become a passerby in your life. I just hope that you won't forget the farewell song I played for you." The black-veiled lady slowly stood up. She faced the large hand that was about to fall, and the aura on her body began to slowly strengthen. This kind of strengthening speed was very fast and instantly pushed her to the level of a half-god. "Aowu!" The Luo Yen whale suddenly cried out. There was a trace of sadness and reluctance in its voice, like a child who had lost its mother. It kept calling out, "Wu Shang!" Suddenly, a thick hand grabbed the black-veiled lady's shoulder. Then the black-veiled lady's delicate body trembled. She slowly turned her head and looked at Zhuan, who had already woken up. The powerful aura on her body slowly withdrew. "Don't do anything stupid. I'm here for everything." Zhuan smiled at Moyan Wushang. Looking at Moyan Wushang's beautiful face, Zhuowen's heart was full of sighs. Actually, from the first time he met the black-veiled lady, Zhuan already had some guesses in his heart, but he didn't think too much about it. Now, after the black-veiled lady had completely removed her veil, Zhuan suddenly realized that the black-veiled lady was Moyan Wushang. No wonder the black-veiled lady treated Zhuan so well when they first met. "Did you do it on purpose?" Moyan Wushang rubbed her eyes. She thought of something and suddenly asked. Zhuan touched his nose and said with an embarrassed smile, "I also just woke up. You don't have to worry about it." Seeing Zhuowen's appearance, Moyan Wushang's beautiful face turned red like an apple and was full of shyness. From Zhuowen's expression, how could she not know that Zhuan should have woken up for a while and was just pretending to be unconscious? Thinking of the shameful words she had said before, her heart was full of shyness and she couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in. "Let's not talk about this now. Let's get rid of this annoying master first." Chapter 1880. Powerful. The purplish-black lightning bolt possessed both the destructive power of lightning and a strange devouring power. When the power of destruction and the power of devour fused together, the power of the purplish-black lightning reached an extremely terrifying level. The giant hand was extremely fast and arrived above the Luo Yen whale in an instant. It was so big that it almost covered the sky. The Luo Yen whale was huge, but it was as insignificant as an ant in front of the giant hand. Zhuowen's awakening was naturally felt by the countless living beings in the Luo Yen whale. The Ryuka people, in particular, were all excited. Zhun was so famous in the Ryuka that he was almost a deity. In the eyes of the Ryuka people, Zhuan was a god, an omnipotent god. When Zhuan stood in front of them, it was as if any difficulty could be easily solved. On the other hand, the living beings outside the Long family, especially the Central Plains cultivators represented by Yuan Hongwen, did not feel any relief after seeing Zhuowen wake up. Their hearts were still filled with a heavy feeling. Boom! The purple-colored lightning instantly collided with the giant hand. However, the crushing force of the giant hand that everyone had expected did not appear. Instead, the giant hand paused in the air for a moment before it was completely enveloped by the purple-black lightning and annihilated into nothingness. Master Devourer's pupils shrank as he stared at the purplish-black lightning bolt. He screamed and involuntarily retreated. Zhuowen's eyes were as bright as stars. With the help of Taoist Master Tsang Long, his spiritual sea had completely transformed into a spirit. Due to the transformation of his spirit, Taoist Master Tsang Long's self-created celestial technique, the slaughtering finger of yellow springs, had also evolved into a powerful superpower the moment his spiritual sea transformed into a spirit. The slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs was Taoist master Tsang Long's self-created celestial technique. It was extremely malleable, and the power of this self-created celestial technique would increase as its owner's cultivation level increased. The moment Master Devourer retreated, Zhuan pointed his right finger at the void and executed the advanced slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs. Countless water droplets from the Yellow Springs emerged from Zhuowen's divine soul. Zhuowen's spirit was inherited from Taoist Tsang Long, and it contained billions of yellow spring water droplets that Taoist Tsang Long had collected throughout his life. The amount had reached a shocking level. Zhuon speculated that even if the slaughtering finger of the netherworld did not advance from an immortal technique to a divine ability, the power of the slaughtering finger of the netherworld formed by the billions of netherworld water droplets would reach the power of an ordinary divine ability. Billions of water droplets gushed out from the yellow spring, forming a huge, round, yellow gate of reincarnation, tens of thousands of feet long, beneath Master Devourer's feet. The gate of reincarnation was so huge that it seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. Coincidentally, Master Devourer was right in the middle of the gate of reincarnation. The moment the gate of reincarnation opened, a terrifying suction force that contained the power of reincarnation came from within the gate of reincarnation. Master Devourer was caught off guard and his legs were sucked into the gate of reincarnation. However, Master Devourer was a decisive person. The moment his legs were sucked into the gate of reincarnation, his right hand turned into a blade and slashed at his legs. He cleanly chopped off his legs and used the recoil force to escape from the gate of reincarnation. After escaping from the gate of reincarnation, Master Devourer heaved a sigh of relief. He felt a lingering fear in his heart, but soon he began to curse Zhuon in his heart. Unfortunately, before Master Devourer could recover from the dangerous situation just now, Zhuowen had already appeared behind Master Devourer at an unknown time. Clang! Zhuowen abruptly pulled out the iron sword that had splattered blood. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye he had pulled out the iron sword. A blazing and terrifying sword light swept out from the tip of the iron sword, forming a huge crescent sword chi. Master Devourer did not even have time to react before the crescent moon sword energy slashed down from the top of his head, cutting him into two. The moment Zhuowen pulled out the first sword, he used the slaughtering finger of Yellow Springs again. The huge gate of reincarnation appeared under Master Devourer's feet once again. When the gate of reincarnation opened, a huge finger that was as big as a mountain slowly stretched out and landed heavily on Master Devourer's body. Rumble! The moment the huge finger landed on Master Devourer's body, Master Devourer let out a blood-curdling scream. His body that had been cut into two collapsed into countless pieces of black flesh. These pieces of flesh were extremely dense, and they were scattered in an area of several hundred feet or even several hundred feet. Moreover, these pieces of black flesh were constantly wriggling. They began to merge with other pieces of black flesh as though they were slowly healing. Staring at the wriggling pieces of black flesh, Yun narrowed his eyes and pulled out his sword again. At the same time, the power of the second-level Dao intent was added to splattering blood. An even more terrifying sword light soared into the sky. When this sword light rose to the highest point, it suddenly scattered into countless light dots. These light dots were filled with extremely sharp sword energy, and they accurately landed on the scattered pieces of black flesh. Originally, Yuan thought that these sword lights could completely annihilate the scattered pieces of black flesh. However, he was wrong. The vitality of these pieces of black flesh was much more tenacious than he had expected. When the sword light slammed into the black piece of meat, it immediately blasted the black piece of meat into countless smaller pieces of meat. Moreover, these smaller pieces of meat also wriggled and gathered together to form an even larger piece of meat. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a pensive look. He knew that Master Devourer's previous life was a parasite in Master Devourer's body. Because it had devoured Master Devourer, its vitality was extremely tenacious. For the current Zhuon, killing Master Devourer was still a little difficult. Master Devourer's previous life was a parasite in Master Devourer's body, and this parasite has an innate fear of Devourer. The Heaven Devourer eye between my eyebrows is a key part of Master Devourer, so I'm afraid it can restrain Master Devourer. When he was in Master Devourer's body, Yuan had personally witnessed the Heaven Devourer eye's miraculous ability to restrain parasites. Therefore, he opened the Heaven Devourer eye again with an attitude of giving it a try. The moment he opened the Heaven Devourer eye, Yuan could clearly feel the excitement transmitted by the Heaven Devourer eye. Another purple-black lightning bolt shot out from the Heaven Devourer eye. This time, the lightning bolt was much larger than before. Moreover, the moment this purple-black lightning bolt shot out, it dispersed into countless purple-black electric threads, densely distributed in an area of several hundred meters, completely enveloping the surrounding black flesh. Then, Yuan heard Master Devourer's terrified scream, as if it had met its most terrifying natural enemy. Master Devourer's scream only lasted for a moment before it stopped. Then, countless electric threads gathered into a lightning bolt, shooting into the Heaven Devourer eye between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Master Devourer's vitality is really tenacious. It didn't die even after that. Through the Heaven Devourer eye, Zhuowen could clearly sense Master Devourer's every move as he was sucked into the Heaven Devourer eye by the purple-black lightning bolt. Master Devourer's countless black flesh pieces seemed to be frozen, cut into countless small parts by the electric threads, and imprisoned in the deepest part of the Heaven Devourer eye. After being baptized by the purple-black electric threads, the wiggling black flesh pieces completely stiffened, no longer wiggling. However, Yuan could feel that these black flesh pieces hadn't lost their vitality, but had fallen into a deep slumber. Furthermore, these black pieces of meat were not simple. Zhuowen could sense that these black pieces of meat were hiding a terrifying amount of energy. This energy didn't belong to Master Devourer, but to Master Devourer. Master Devourer's power was too strong. Although it was on the verge of death after giving birth to Master Devourer, it was still extremely terrifying. Although Master Devourer had devoured the last of Master Devourer's energy, it couldn't exert all of its energy. After all, the time it took to devour Master Devourer's energy was too short. If Master Devourer was given enough time, it could exert the full power of Master Devourer. At that time, even Yang Yi, who was at the late Heavenly God realm, might not be its match. Unfortunately, Master Devourer was too careless. The moment it devoured Master Devourer and advanced to the early Heavenly God realm, it attacked in a high-profile manner. It didn't take the numerous cultivators of the Heavenly Armor continent seriously at all. It didn't even take God Ganj seriously. Of course, if Yang Yi hadn't appeared out of nowhere, and Zhuowen hadn't comprehended the second-level Dao meaning, borrowed Sangjia's power, and sacrificed his life to create the fifth step sixth sword, Master Devourer wouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state. However, there weren't so many ifs in the world. Master Devourer had been completely sealed by Zhuowen's Heaven Devourer eye, so it couldn't cause any trouble for the time being. What happened to Zhuowen? How did he suddenly become so strong? Inside the Luo Yen whale, Yuan Hongwen stared blankly at the scene, especially when he saw Master Devourer being devoured by the Heaven Devourer eye between Zhuowen's eyebrows. His heart thumped wildly and he was shocked. In the Luo Yen whale world, countless creatures fell into silence. However, after a short moment of silence, they burst into enthusiastic cheers. Originally, they thought they were going to die, but they didn't expect things to turn around. Everyone stared fervently at Zhuowen's back. They knew that the owner of this seemingly thin back had saved them all at the last moment. Lord Longwen, the Ryuka people knelt down on one knee. The fervent look in their eyes was the most intense. The other cultivators in the Luo Yen whale world followed the example of the Ryuka people and knelt down on one knee before Zhuowen. Zhuowen had saved them, so he deserved their kneeling. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao snuggled up to each other. Their eyes were full of pride. Zhuowen was their son. As a mother, they were naturally gratified to see their son turn the tide and be so outstanding. Bang! A muffled sound came. In the distant starry sky, a violent explosion suddenly set off a terrifying ring-shaped airwave. This airwave was like a meteorite belt, radiating in all directions. Wherever it passed, the starry sky was distorted and turned into a vacuum of nothingness. In the center of the airwave, a stalwart figure slowly walked out. Chapter 1881. The Sixth Sword Strike. 5 tiny ants actually dared to try and shake a tree like ants? How ridiculous! Yang Yi stood in the center of the blast. His clothes fluttered in the wind. The self-destruction of Fuxi and the 4 genuine immortal soldiers did not affect him much. Turning his head, Yang Yi's gaze fell on Zhuowen. Suddenly, he let out a soft cry of surprise. He had discovered something different about Zhuowen. On the surface, Zhuowen's cultivation was still at the late stage of the fairy immortal realm. However, Yang Yi felt the aura of a divine soul from Zhuowen. Divine soul? How did your sea of consciousness transform into a divine soul? Yang Yi frowned and whispered in surprise. While Yang Yi was surprised, the huge heavenly armor planet suddenly trembled. The trembling came from the depths of the heavenly armor planet. An invisible wave of power spread out from the inside of the heavenly armor planet. A stream of light rushed out from the inside of the heavenly armor planet. It instantly rushed to Zhuowen's side and revealed the strong figure of the first mountain god. Zhuowen, release your perfect holy body, the first mountain god said in a deep voice. Although Zhuowen was surprised, he did as the first mountain god said. Ever since he found out from the Tsang Long Taoist divine soul that the first mountain god was a doppelganger of the Tsang Long Taoist, Zhuowen's previous vigilance toward the first mountain god had disappeared. The first mountain god flew in front of the great perfection holy physique and pointed his right finger at the center of the holy physique's eyebrows. Then, Zhuowen realized that the first mountain god's finger was filled with a strange star power. This star power did not belong to the first mountain god. It was refined by the first mountain god from the inside of the heavenly armor planet. The heavenly armor planet has been secretly set up by Brother Tsangjie. Originally, Brother Tsangjie wanted to leave it for me to refine. However, I know my limits. Tian, I hope you will not waste my sacrifice. The first mountain god took a deep look at Zhuowen. His body collapsed and turned into countless specks of light. Then, a powerful wave of astral energy poured into Zhuowen's perfect holy physique. Although the demigod body can't bear the heavenly armor star's star energy completely, when combined with the Azure Dragon's divine soul, it can still unleash the star god energy of an early heavenly god. Coupled with your second-level Tao insight, it's enough to contend against Yang Yi. I don't expect you to be able to kill Yang Yi. I only hope that you can protect Heavenly Armor Planet and the countless martial artists on the mainland so that they can avoid this kind of disaster. The first mountain god's words gradually faded into Zhuowen's ears. Then, the demigod body completely merged with Zhuowen's body. At that moment, Zhuowen could clearly feel the pulse of the heavenly armor planet. It was like he had established a bloodline connection with the heavenly armor planet. Waves of surging astral energy kept flowing into Zhuowen's demigod body. The astral energy was transferred from the demigod body to Zhuowen's body and started the final fusion with Zhuowen's divine soul. Once the two merged, Zhuowen's body would produce star god energy. Then, Zhuowen would be promoted to heavenly god in a short period of time. However, this promotion was only temporary. This was the first mountain god's demigod body. He had forcibly withstood the erosion of the heavenly armor planet's powerful astral energy and forcefully combined it with Tsangjie's divine soul to produce star god energy. This power did not belong to Zhuowen. It belonged to Tsangjie and the first mountain god. Zhuowen had to pay a great price to accept this powerful and unfamiliar power. If it was light, his meridians would be broken. If it was heavy, he would lose his life. However, Zhuowen did not think so much. If it was not for the Tsang Dragon Taoist, he would have been dead when he used the blood-splashing 5 steps and the 6th sword. His life could be said to have been saved by the Tsang Dragon Taoist. Heavenly God! Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and revealed a serious expression. Although Zhuowen was only at the early stage of the heavenly god realm, the latter possessed the power of the second-level Tao insight. This power could increase Zhuowen's overall strength by 2 times. With the power of the second-level Tao insight, even if the early-stage heavenly god Zhuowen was not a match for the early-stage heavenly god realm, The difference was not big. What Yang Yi feared the most was the blood-splashing 5 steps 6 sword. The 6th sword was executed at the cost of one's life. Its power was comparable to the might of a powerful divine weapon. Feeling the surging star god energy from the combination of the heavenly armor planet's divine soul and the divine soul, Zhuowen's heart surged with a heroic feeling. He took a step forward and asked the same question again. Yang Yi was definitely not his real name. Zhuowen was certain in his heart. Yang Yi looked at Zhuowen indifferently and said, "Is this important to you? Or is it really important to a dead person?" As he spoke, the corners of Yang Yi's mouth curled up into a cold smile. He slowly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already behind Zhuowen. He clenched his right hand's fingers and grabbed an illusory halberd with the power of the void. He suddenly stabbed it toward Zhuowen's heart. 5 swords. Zhuowen stomped on the ground with his right foot and quickly turned around. He unsheathed his iron sword from its sheath at an extremely fast speed. He quickly unsheathed it 5 times, one after another. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. Bang! 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 The 5 sword lights were almost side by side. They separated into 5 directions and sealed off all of Yang Yi's escape routes. If Yang Yi wanted to break through the 5 sword lights, he could only face them head-on. Otherwise, there was no other way. One of the sword lights blasted onto the illusory halberd. It cancelled out the violent energy on the halberd and was completely annihilated. Yang Yi did not guard against the other 4 sword lights. After cancelling out the first sword light, Yang Yi dealt with it rather awkwardly. At the same time, Zhuowen put his iron sword back into its sheath again. The power of the second level Dao will condensed in his palm and poured into the 5 steps around him. Thump, thump. At this moment, Zhuowen quickly took 5 steps forward. With each step, he pulled out a sword. The sword lights were like the blazing sun. The 5 swords this time were faster than the previous ones. It was so fast that even Zhuowen did not expect it. Yang Yi, who was originally dealing with the 4 sword lights in a somewhat awkward manner, saw the 5 sword lights that were even more powerful. His face instantly turned gloomy. Bone-burying soul banner. Yang Yi took out a banner made of bone from his spirit ring. The banner's main part was made of a rather thick spine. At the tip of the banner, there was a silver beast skin hanging. On the surface of the beast skin, there were various patterns and symbols drawn with blood. These patterns and symbols were completely incomprehensible to Zhuowen. Yang Yi bit the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood essence onto the surface of the silver beast skin. In an instant, the blood essence on the surface of the beast skin was completely absorbed. Then, it formed a huge bloody skull. Moreover, this skull was extremely strange. When the skull pattern was formed, endless blood light appeared above the banner. The blood light condensed into a huge bloody skull shadow that was thousands of feet tall. The skull shadow opened its bloody mouth and swallowed the 5 sword lights in one gulp. Zhuowen's eyes were sharp. He could clearly see that this bloody skull was indeed terrifying. However, after swallowing the 5 sword lights, the surface of the bloody skull had obviously dimmed a lot. Clearly, the 5 sword lights did have some effect on the blood-red skull. After swallowing the 5 sword lights, blood mist burst out from the surface of the bloody skull as if it would collapse at any moment. Yang Yi looked at the bloody skull that was on the verge of collapse with a gloomy gaze. He was secretly shocked by Zhuowen's current strength. He did not expect an early-stage heavenly god with the support of second-level Dao intent to be so powerful. This kid must be killed. Yang Yi's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Yang Yi was only an early-stage heavenly god, but he could rely on second-level Dao intent to possess such terrifying strength. Naturally, Yang Yi would not allow Zhuowen to continue growing. Blood sacrifice to the heavens. Yang roared. His right hand slashed across his left arm. Instantly, his left arm was severed and exploded into blood mist. He tossed his left arm to the blood-red skull. The skull opened its mouth and swallowed the arm, chewing it non-stop. Bush, bush, bush. After swallowing the arm, the bloody skull exploded with blood light, spreading out and enveloping the entire starry sky. From the outside, The starry sky within 100 million kilometers of the bloody skull was dyed red. Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes were filled with fear. The bloody light was too powerful. She had no choice but to drive the Luo Yanjing away from the area covered by the bloody light. She looked at Zhuowen with a worried expression. Shiji stood beside Moyan Wushang and sighed. Sister Wushang, don't worry. Zhuowen has already become a heavenly god. He won't be defeated so easily. Moyan Wushang did not reply. She just looked at Zhuowen's back in a daze. Then used the sixth sword. Within the sanguine light, Zhuowen felt his entire body freeze. This sanguine light had an extremely strong suppressive feeling. Just as Zhuowen was about to make another move, Blackie's voice rang out in his mind. Xiao He and Cheng Huang appeared in front of Zhuowen with the Fushi cauldron. Xiao He. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He had a bad feeling. Xiao He and Cheng Huang looked at each other but did not reply. Instead, they rushed into the Fushi cauldron. Then, the Fushi cauldron began to collapse, turning into countless white lights. At the same time, a shocking dragon roar came from Zhuowen's spirit ring. Then he realized that Xiao He's dragon corpse was uncontrollably rushing out. The dragon corpse crashed into the white light. Then, endless blood spilled out and the white light was dyed a strange black. Zhuowen will help you block the sixth sword. Use the sixth sword. Only the sixth sword can completely resist Yang Yi. This is Master's long-cherished wish. He wants to protect the heavenly armor planet. So do we. You're all working hard. Cheng Huang and I want to work hard too. Use the sixth sword. Xiao He's voice rang in Zhuowen's ears. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. However, tears flowed out of his eyes. He knew that if he used the sixth sword, Xiao He and Cheng Huang might completely disappear along with the Fushi cauldron. Die! Suddenly, the blood-red light began to shrink. It turned into the image of a huge blood-red skull. Zhuowen just happened to be in the center of the skull. Yun, you're dead. This move is enough to kill any heavenly god. Yang Yi's mouth was full of sarcasm. He looked at Zhuowen indifferently in the shadow. Use the sixth sword. If you don't, we're all going to die. Don't let Master, Fushi, and the others die with regrets, Xiao He roared. Songjie, Fushi, Chaoyu, Zhanbi, Xiao He, Cheng Huang. Thank you, Zhuowen murmured. He finally drew the sixth sword. Xiao He, Cheng Huang, and the Fushi cauldron merged into the sword hilt, causing the sixth sword to shine with astonishing light. Rumble. Chapter 1882. To shrink the earth into inches, the sixth sword was wielded with the heavenly god's energy and the support of the second-level Tao will. The power of the sixth sword was much more powerful and terrifying than the sixth sword he wielded the first time. Yang Yi hovered in the starry sky as he stared at the blood-red skull phantom that radiated for hundreds of millions of kilometers in front of him. In the blood-red region at the very center of the phantom, an inconspicuous sword light was constantly expanding. In an instant, the sword light filled the blood-red skull shadow. Under the influence of the sword light, the entire blood-red skull collapsed. The moment the blood-red skull collapsed, the sword light did not stop expanding. Instead, it continued to expand at an extremely fast speed, sweeping towards Yang Yi. The sixth sword again. Yang Yi's face turned ugly. The sixth sword that Zhuowen wielded this time was too powerful. It was much more powerful than the previous sixth sword. It even gave Yang Yi a sense of extreme fear and danger. This kid is so calculating. Looking at the terrifying sword light that radiated in all directions, Yang Yi originally wanted to use his powerful void energy to prepare to dodge the terrifying sixth sword. However, when he used the void energy, he found that his whole body was surrounded by a terrifying stagnant feeling. It was this stagnant feeling that made it impossible for Yang Yi to use the void energy, and it was difficult for him to find a direction. Zhuowen had taken Yang Yi's powerful void energy into consideration. Therefore, when he wielded the sixth sword, he dispersed it in such a way that it interfered with Yang Yi's void energy. The speed of the sword light was too fast, and there were too many of them. In an instant, they enveloped the starry sky where Yang Yi was. After the sixth sword, this kid will definitely die. I just need to withstand this powerful sword light. Yang Yi's eyes flickered. He could vaguely guess the price of the sixth sword. He did not need to withstand this terrifying sword light at all. As long as he withstood this sword light, Yuan would die without a burial place even if he did not attack. The moment the sword light completely engulfed Yang Yi's body, Yang used all his skills. Not only did he cover the surface of his body with his star god energy, but he also took out a rusty ring from his spirit ring. As soon as the ring was opened, it emitted a dark light, covering the surface of his body with a dark light shield. Retreat! Moyan Wushang's face changed. He controlled the Luo Yenjing to retreat again. The area covered by the sixth sword's sword light was much larger than the blood-red skull. Moreover, the sword light of the sixth sword was too terrifying. Moyan Wushang could feel that a single sword light was enough to kill the Luo Yenjing and destroy everyone inside. When the sword light faded away, the black light barrier surrounding Yang Yi was shattered. Yang Yi's body was tattered and his hair was disheveled, making him look like a beggar. As for the rusty ring on Yang Yi's hand, it completely shattered into countless pieces the moment his figure was revealed. Puchi! Yang Yi suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his expression extremely dispirited. Then, with a gloomy look in his eyes, he muttered to himself in a low voice, "I still underestimated this kid's sixth sword. I didn't expect the power of this kid's sixth sword to reach such a level. To be able to injure me so severely, this kid can die without regrets." Puchi! However, before Yang Yi could finish his words, an iron sword suddenly slashed across his waist, and Yang Yi was directly cut in half. Yang Yi looked at the lower half of his body that had been cut in half and his eyes narrowed. Then he saw Zhuowen behind him with a cold gaze. "Are you surprised that I'm not dead?" Zhuowen looked indifferently at Yang Yi who had been cut in half. His gaze was very cold. This battle was too tragic. He had lost too many things. Songjie, Fushi, Dongfang, Nangong, Beichen, Shimin, and even Xiao He and Cheng Huang had sacrificed themselves in order to bear the price of the sixth sword. At this moment, Yuan was filled with monstrous killing intent towards Yang. He wanted nothing more than to pull out his tendons and peel off his bones. Yang Yi's face was gloomy. Although his body had been cut in half, he was still very calm. He formed a seal with both of his hands, and then a powerful void energy gushed out from his body. His speed instantly increased, and he wanted to escape with the upper half of his body. Unfortunately, Yang Yi did not escape for long before he was blocked by a powerful invisible ripple. This invisible ripple turned into a ring shape, encircling Yang Yi within an area of several hundred feet. The power of a second-level Dao insight. Yang Yi's expression changed slightly. He immediately turned around and looked at Zhuowen who was slowly walking towards him. The sixth sword had severely injured him, and he had less than 10% of his strength left. Moreover, he had been cut in half by Zhuowen's sword, and his strength had been greatly reduced again. Now, with only the upper half of his body left, he was in an extremely bad state. What was even more inconceivable was that Yuan was unscathed after using the sixth sword. It was really inconceivable to him. Zhuowen did not pay attention to Yang Yi's shock. He waved the iron sword in his right hand, and another sword mark appeared. Yang Yi's remaining right arm was cut off. Raising his arm, Zhuowen deliberately controlled the iron sword so that Yang Yi would feel actual pain. As expected, after his right arm was cut off, Yang Yi's face was pale and his facial muscles were twisted. Originally, with his strength, it was easy for him to block out the pain. However, Yuan used the power of Dao insight to invade Yang Yi's pain nerves, causing Yang Yi's sense of pain to be many times more sensitive than ordinary people. This sword strike is for Songjie. Zhuowen's gaze was cold and indifferent like a demon's as he drew his sword once more. He controlled the might of this sword strike and cut open a layer of flesh on the wound on Yang Yi's upper body, causing blood to splatter. Yang Yi grunted in pain and almost cried out. This sword strike is for Senior Fushi. This sword strike is for Xiao He and Cheng Huang. Zhuowen's gaze became crimson red as he slashed out again and again. However, he controlled the strength of every single sword strike with great precision. Not only was it able to achieve the greatest pain, it wouldn't cause Yang Yi to die because of it. At this moment, Yang Yi was almost angered to the point of spitting blood. Zhuan was intentionally not letting him die a quick death, and instead wanted to torture him to death. Yang even heard Zhuan slash his body once more for Ho Shu and Gugu. This caused Yang Yi to almost faint from anger. However, just as he was about to faint, Zhuan slashed out with his sword again, causing him to immediately wake up from the pain. Zhuan slowly sheathed his sword and stood there. He quietly looked at Yang Yi before him and saw that Yang Yi's upper body was practically devoid of flesh. Everything had been shaved off by Zhuan, leaving behind only a blood-red skeleton. The only thing that was intact should be Yang Yi's head. You've got guts. You actually dared to put me in such a sorry state. Yang Yi's gaze was extremely gloomy as he coldly spoke to Zhuan. Zhuan stared at Yang Yi's head, but he was somewhat astonished. Yang Yi was clearly at the end of his rope, so why was there no panic on his face? You're at death's door, yet you're still so arrogant? This last sword is for myself. You've deceived me for far too long. When I first met you, I'm afraid I've already fallen into your scheme, right? Today, I will completely wipe out all of your schemes. I will wipe them out completely. As he spoke, Zhuan's wrist turned. The iron sword was like a fan as it spun fiercely. Then his right hand was horizontally in front of Yang Yi's head. Puchi. Yang Yi's head was directly cut into two halves. However, Zhuan's gaze was grave as he discovered that Yang Yi's eyes, which were cut into two halves, were extremely calm and even somewhat frighteningly cold. Bang! Yang Yi's head suddenly exploded and a terrifying aura spread out. Zhuan couldn't help but continuously retreat. His gaze was gloomy as he stared at Yang Yi's head that had exploded on its own. He didn't know why, but after killing Yang Yi, he didn't feel relaxed at all. Instead, he felt heavy, and even an inexplicable sense of crisis arose in his mind. Dead, Yang Yi is also dead. In the distance, Mo Yen Wushang and Shi Ji on the Luo Yen whale heaved a sigh of relief. Their hearts were filled with joy. Yang Yi gave everyone too much pressure, so much so that it was as if a mountain was pressing down on their hearts. With Yang Yi around, no one dared to even breathe loudly. Master Shi and Yang Yi are both dead. We're saved. In the world inside the Luo Yen whale, countless warriors were cheering. They were all shouting Zhuan's name and praising Zhuan's great achievements. In particular, the Ryuka people in the world raised their heads and puffed out their chests. Their eyes were filled with extreme fanaticism and worship. This was because the person who had saved the heavenly armor continent was their Ryuka hero. His name was Long Wen. In the Ryuka, Long Tian and Jian Mu came side by side. The two of them had been in the Tsang Dragon Palace all this time. Later, Taoist Master Tsang Long merged with Zhuan's Sea of Consciousness and helped Zhuan to become a divine realm expert. After that, Zhuan used the Gate of Reincarnation to send him into the Luo Yen whale's inner world. As expected of Master Long Wen, he single-handedly supported the entire heavenly armor continent. He's the hero of the entire continent. Long Tian trembled with excitement. Jian Mu was in a daze. After he woke up, he learned that Mu Chenxue was seriously injured and unconscious. He was numb as if he had lost his soul. I'm overthinking. Zhuan shook his head. Immediately he thought of Xiao He and Qing Huang's sacrifice. His heart was filled with bitterness. Although Yang Yi was dead, his old friend had passed away. He didn't have the slightest joy of victory. At the same time, Zhuan looked around, trying to find traces of the infant devourer. However, his expression changed slightly as he discovered that the infant devourer had disappeared without a trace. The infant devourer had taken advantage of the battle between him and Yang Yi to escape. Obviously, the infant devourer had sensed that Zhuan wasn't someone to be trifled with and had slipped away. Suddenly, Zhuan's brows furrowed slightly. He sensed two extremely terrifying auras that were currently rapidly approaching this side. After sensing these two auras, Zhuan's forehead was covered with cold sweat. His body trembled. He discovered that these two auras were too powerful. So strong. They're much stronger than Yang. Zhuan's face was pale. His sea of consciousness had transformed into a divine soul. Moreover, with the support of the primordial symbol puppet's origin energy, his divine sense was much stronger than that of an ordinary divine realm expert. Therefore, he immediately sensed the two auras approaching. At this moment, Zhuan was really panicking. Even though he had the sixth sword, which could cause blood splashing in 5 steps, he still didn't have any chance of winning. He could feel the difference in quality between him and these two auras. No matter how he struggled, he would be defeated by these two auras. They're here. Zhuowen's body trembled. Immediately, his gaze fell on the distant starry sky. There, 2 figures in long robes were approaching step by step. Although they looked like they were taking a leisurely stroll, each step covered a distance of hundreds of millions of meters. Zhuan had never seen such a footwork before, but he could guess the name of this footwork. Ground shrink. Chapter 1883. The seventh sword. This should be the place, right? The old man with disheveled hair took a step out of the outer space and arrived several billion kilometers away from the heavenly armor star. At first glance, he saw Zhuowen cutting Yang Yi's head into 2 halves. It's this little guy, right? And that's Sakyamuni's doppelganger. I sensed Sakyamuni's aura from that doppelganger. The old man muttered as he glanced at Zhuan. His gaze suddenly fell on Yang Yi's head that had been cut into 2 and exploded. Oh no, this little guy actually destroyed Sakyamuni's doppelganger. This Sakyamuni is extremely cunning. He has many doppelgangers, and some of them are strong and some are weak. Moreover, his doppelgangers all have hidden trump cards. Once the doppelganger is destroyed, the hidden trump cards will be activated. They will basically tear the murderer of his doppelganger to shreds. This little guy is in danger. The green-robed Taoist who was following behind the old man frowned the moment he saw Zhuan completely destroy Yang Yi's head. He immediately rushed toward Zhuan before the old man could. What? Damn it. The old man's expression changed slightly. He took a step forward and was already several billion kilometers away. Unfortunately, although the 2 of them were fast, they were still too late. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the old man and the Taoist. He didn't recognize the old man with disheveled hair, but he wasn't unfamiliar with the Taoist behind the old man. Because this Taoist was the Taoist who rode a green ox that had appeared on the boulder when Zhuowen comprehended Tao insight. Especially when he saw the 2 of them speeding up, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with vigilance. Although he had already guessed the Taoist's identity, it did not mean that he could trust him unconditionally. Little guy, hurry up and leave. It's dangerous over there. In the starry sky hundreds of millions of kilometers away, before the Taoist approached Zhuowen, the booming sound had already been heard. It kept reverberating in the ears of Zhuowen, Luo Yanjing and all the others. Who are these 2 people? At this moment, Moyan Wushang and Shiji on the Luo Yanjing also noticed the old man and the Taoist. They were shocked by the Taoist's strength, but they were even more puzzled by what the Taoist said to Zhuan. Yang Yi was clearly killed by Zhuan. How could Zhuowen still be in any danger? Zhuowen was startled, but he quickly recovered from his shock. His entire body trembled, and the ominous feeling in his heart grew stronger. Clang. Zhuowen abruptly pulled out his iron sword and stomped with his right foot. His second-level Dao will spread out as he turned around and stomped with his right foot, causing his entire body to fly backward. His gaze landed behind him. Yang 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 yang. Yang 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 yang. Was yang yang yang. Yang 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 yang. Yang 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 yang. Yang 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 was yang yang. The figure's entire body was illusory, but the aura on his body was extremely terrifying, far surpassing Yang Yi's aura. When the illusory figure appeared, Zhuowen's heart thumped wildly. Then, his whole body stiffened as if he was frozen. He could not move at all. The man was middle-aged. His hair was tied up in a high bun. There was a red vertical mark between his eyebrows. His body exuded an indescribable sense of pressure. Not bad. A mere ant killed my doppelganger. It's commendable. But killing my doppelganger is not without a price. The man's voice was slightly hoarse. His voice seemed to echo in Zhuowen's ears. It even affected his newly formed divine soul. As soon as the man finished speaking, Zhuowen's body involuntarily burst into clouds of blood mist. He wanted to resist, but he was bound by an invisible force. He could not move at all. Sakyamuni, you lost the bet. What do you mean by this? Stop it now. The old man and the Taoist priest were still hundreds of millions of kilometers away in the starry sky. They watched as Zhuowen burst into clouds of blood mist under Sakyamuni's attack. Their faces were extremely gloomy. I did lose, but this is just an ant. I killed him. Do you have any objections? The man's gaze was indifferent. He did not pay any attention to the old man and the Taoist priest. Instead, he gently flicked his right finger. An invisible finger intent shot out and pointed directly at the space between Zhuowen's eyebrows. This finger intent was too terrifying. Zhuowen watched it sweep over, but he could do nothing. He knew very well that if he was hit by this finger intent, he would definitely die. Move! Under this life and death crisis, Zhuowen roared out in a low voice. Suddenly, second-level Tao insight gushed out from within his body, and strong and shapeless ripples stretched out with the intention of resisting the strong squeezing force that gushed out from Sakra's image. However, the second-level Tao intent was too difficult to resist. Zhuowen did not even have the strength to draw his sword. Move! Zhuowen's right hand gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. His veins bulged as he stared at the giant shadow in the sky looking down at him. He completely understood that Yang Yi was just a small clone of this shadow. The real Yang Yi was this guy called Sakyamuni in front of him. Just for a so-called bet, you toyed with the countless lives of the heavenly armor planet and the heavenly armor continent in the palms of your hands. You treated countless lives like grass. No matter who you are, if you want to kill me, Jun, you will have to pay the price. Zhuowen's eyes were red. He stared coldly at Sakyamuni, as well as the old man and the Taoist priest who were rushing over from the starry sky. From the words of the Taoist priest and Sakyamuni, he could almost guess the whole story. Yang Yi had said before that everything was just a bet, and the countless lives of the heavenly armor planet were just sacrificial lambs. He finally knew that the two people involved in the bet were Sakyamuni and the Taoist priest. He recalled his encounter with Yang Yi and the Taoist priest when he was comprehending Tao intent on the ancient boulder. He knew that their encounter was not a coincidence, but a deliberate arrangement. Sakyamuni smiled coldly. It's just a planet. If it wasn't for Devour, I wouldn't care about a mere planet. I'm already thinking highly of you by using the heavenly armor planet and all the lives on it as a bet. Even if you die, you ants should feel honored. Whoosh! The finger intent reached Zhuowen's forehead in an instant. However, just as it was about to enter Zhuowen's soul, the finger intent suddenly collapsed. An even more terrifying and powerful ripple of energy swept out from Zhuowen's soul. Oh my God! This kid's Tao intent has strengthened. He has reached the third level of Tao intent. The old man who rushed over widened his eyes and exclaimed in disbelief. He stared fixedly at Zhuowen, but soon, joy appeared on his face. He knew that Zhuowen had just reached the second level of Tao intent not long ago. Now, under the threat of death, he had broken through again and reached the third level of Tao intent. It was his first time seeing someone break through Tao intent consecutively in such a short period of time. In other words, he had never seen anyone who could comprehend the second and third level of Tao intent consecutively in such a short period of time in the heaven domain of Huaxia. Even the Taoist priest, who had always been calm, had a blazing look in his eyes. In your eyes, the lives on the heavenly armor continent are ants. However, in my eyes, the heavenly armor continent is my hometown. The lives here are of the same origin as me. My family, friends, and brothers are here. Even though ants are small, they can still bite you back. The outcome is only death. Zhuowen's gaze was calm like water. His third-level Tao intent abruptly shot out, and the power of the ripples around him suddenly increased by countless times. The terrifying pressure released by the Nadi Shiva instantly vanished. Bang, 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 bang. In this instant, Yuan swung his sword 5 times in succession. 5 sword lights were infinitely magnified at this moment, and each sword light was like a rising sun. Sakyamuni's eyes narrowed slightly. Even though he was slightly surprised that Zhuan had suddenly broken through to the third level of Dao intent, he still didn't pay much attention to it. He waved his right hand and wiped away the 5 sword lights. The 6th sword, Zhuan drew his sword once more. The sword light of the 6th sword formed a crescent-shaped sword light that was even more dazzling than the sun. It tore through the starry sky and covered the countless starlight in the starry sky. Sakyamuni's gaze was slightly serious. He clenched his right hand and directly grabbed the crescent-shaped sword light. Bang! However, this sword light wasn't simple. Even though Sakyamuni had grabbed the sword light, a rather large wound had appeared on his palm. "You actually injured me?" Sakyamuni stared blankly at his palm. Obviously, he didn't expect that a mere ant would actually be able to injure him. However, he quickly revealed a furious expression. However, just as Sakyamuni was stunned, Zhuan put the iron sword back into the scabbard with difficulty. The moment the 6th sword was swung out, the side effects on his body had already appeared. His body was collapsing, and countless cracks appeared. Moreover, the meridians in his body were even blocked because of this. "You can still use the 7th sword, right?" Zhuan's left hand lightly pinched the old scabbard of the blood-splashing 5 steps. Back then, Zhan Bai had only used the 6th sword, and the 7th sword had never been unsheathed. This was because the 6th sword was already a sword that paid the price of one's life. All the masters who had used the 6th sword had died, and no one had ever used the 7th sword. However, Zhuan could clearly feel that the 7th sword of the blood-splashing 5 steps had indeed existed. He was already at the early stage of the heavenly god realm, and he also had 3 levels of Dao insight. Even though his life was slipping away after using the 6th sword, his life force as a heavenly god was extremely vigorous, and he hadn't completely died yet. However, with the speed at which his life was slipping away, he knew that it was only a matter of time before he died. Buzz! The blood-splashing 5 steps trembled and buzzed, as if it was waiting for Zhuan to draw the 7th sword. "The 7th sword," Zhuan muttered as if he was sleep-talking. His trembling right hand suddenly became firm, and then he drew the sword again. This was the one and only 7th sword. In the countless years since the birth of the blood-splashing 5 steps, this was the first time that Zhuan had drawn the 7th sword. The moment this sword was drawn, the iron sword shattered inch by inch into fine powder, and an extremely inconspicuous black sword light silently swept out, instantly arriving at the wound on the right palm of Sakyamuni's illusory right hand. At this moment, Sakyamuni's illusory figure was still staring blankly at the wound on his palm. He had never thought that Zhuan would actually be able to draw a sword and attack, so he didn't care at all. Pucci. Chapter 1884. Touching the moment Sakyamuni's palm exploded into a bloody mist, the entire starry sky fell silent. Whether it was the countless living beings in the Luo Yen whale, the Taoist and the old man who rushed over, or Sakyamuni himself, they all fell into a daze at this moment. This little guy actually hurt Sakyamuni's projection? How amazing! The disheveled old man slowly lowered his head. His gaze fell on Zhuo Wen's body, which was constantly collapsing. He was shocked. Even the Taoist's body froze as he looked at Zhuo Wen in disbelief. Although this was only Sakyamuni's projection and not Sakyamuni himself, it was still far from what a heavenly god could contend with. Logically speaking, no matter how much Zhuo struggled, he should not be able to hurt Sakyamuni at all. However, not only was he injured, he even blew Sakyamuni's palm into smithereens. It was truly shocking. Even if you're just an ant, you still want to bite back before you die? The Taoist muttered softly. Then, with a stomp of his right foot, he rushed to Zhuowen's side. "You're courting death!" Sakyamuni roared angrily. His exploded palm instantly recovered, and he struck out again. This time, his palm was much stronger than before. He was the ruler of the Sakyamuni domain. Even if he was just a projection, it should have been more than enough to deal with Zhuowen, who was at the heavenly god level. However, he did not expect that he would be injured by a mere ant like Chun. How could the proud Sakyamuni tolerate this? Therefore, he struck out with his palm and aimed it at Zhuowen, wanting to smash him into smithereens. Unfortunately, The moment Sakyamuni's palm came down, the Taoist waved his sleeve, and a green light shot out and struck the palm. Then, the palm collapsed. Moreover, this green light followed Sakra's palm and entered the body of Sakra's phantasm like a hot knife through butter. It kept stirring inside his body, and after a while, Sakra's phantasm became much dimmer. "Sakyamuni, you lost our bet. How dare you attack me?" the Taoist said indifferently. Sakra retreated dozens of steps back and stared at the Taoist with a gloomy gaze. He said coldly, "Taiching, I have indeed lost, but this child is not a bet. If I kill him, then I kill him. What do you mean by blocking me? Are you trying to take advantage of the fact that I'm not here? Sakyamuni, do you think that I don't know that you've secretly placed your clone Yang-Yi in the Sky Armor continent? Do you think that you can increase your chances of winning by placing your clone there? It's a pity that I've also made a secret move. This Zhuan came from the Huaxia continent of the Huaxia heavenly realm. Otherwise, do you think this boy is qualified to comprehend Tao Will? Tao Will is my concept. Only living beings of the Huaxia heavenly realm are qualified to comprehend Tao Will. Since this boy has comprehended 3 levels of Tao Will, he is half a disciple of the true Lord of Tao and Virtue. If you want to kill me, you'll have to get through me first. The true Lord of Tao and Virtue's eyes were calm. He placed his right hand on Zhuowen's chest and a thick energy surged into Zhuowen's body. It flowed along his meridians and circulated throughout his body, slowing down the speed of his life. However, Zhuowen knew that even though he had slowed down the speed of his life was still constantly flowing away. Once the time was up, he would completely die. He was even more certain of this Taoist's identity because this person called himself the true Lord of Tao and Virtue. In the legends of Huaxia, this title was the nickname of the founder of Taoism, Lao Zi. Zhuan completely understood after hearing the true Lord of Tao and Virtue's words. It wasn't a coincidence that his soul had transmigrated to the Sky Armor continent. It was all arranged by the true Lord of Tao and Virtue. Just like how Sakyamuni had sent his clone Yang-Yi to the Sky Armor continent, the true Lord of Tao and Virtue had chosen suitable mortals from the earth of the Huaxia continent to reincarnate into the Sky Armor continent. It was also to increase his chances of winning this bet. Although he had transmigrated because of the Fushi Cauldron and had always thought that his transmigration was due to Cangjie, he knew that the Fushi Cauldron had actually escaped Cangjie's control back then and the true Lord of Tao and Virtue had used the Fushi Cauldron to land on Earth. Zhuan had accidentally picked up the Fushi Cauldron and had fallen into the hands of the true Lord of Tao and Virtue. To him, this was an undeserved calamity. At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze was extremely cold. He knew very well that the seemingly kind true Lord of Tao and Sakyamuni weren't much different. The true Lord of Tao and Virtue also viewed the countless living beings on the Sky Armor continent as ants and didn't care about their lives at all. If Zhuan hadn't comprehended the 3rd level of Tao meaning, the true Lord of Tao probably wouldn't have cared if Zhuan lived or died. At the same time, he thought of the ancient times of the Sky Armor continent. Although there were many people who had comprehended Tao meaning, all the geniuses who had comprehended Tao meaning had entered the door of profundity. Perhaps the door of profundity wasn't a good place at all. Even Yuan Hongwen hadn't truly comprehended Tao meaning and had only touched the edge of it. It could be said that since ancient times, Zhuan was the only one who had truly comprehended Tao meaning on the Sky Armor continent. The reason for this was closely related to what the true Lord of Tao had said about his soul coming from the sky domain of Huaxia. Sakyamuni's expression froze. Although his main body wasn't weaker than the true Lord of Tao and was even stronger than the true Lord of Tao to a certain extent, his main body was in a state of seclusion and couldn't come over at the moment. The strength of this projection was insignificant compared to the true Lord of Tao and Yu Qing by his side. It would be easy for the true Lord of Tao to destroy his projection. If the true Lord of Tao hadn't shown mercy earlier, Sakyamuni's projection would have been destroyed by the true Lord of Tao and wouldn't have allowed him to speak so much nonsense. Sakyamuni, we're not afraid of you coming over personally. But the true Lord of Tao and I will work together. If you want to deal with us, you'll have to be mentally prepared. Yu Qing, whose hair was a mess, clenched his fists and said maliciously. Sakyamuni's expression changed slightly. He looked coldly at Zhuan beside the true Lord of Tao and sneered, "Forget it. This kid is going to die anyway. No matter how powerful the sky domain of Huaxia is, I don't believe you can defy the heavens and change your fate. It's not your style to waste energy on someone who's about to die." Zhuan narrowed his eyes but didn't answer. Sakyamuni's words had a hidden meaning, but he didn't respond. The true Lord of Tao glanced at Zhuan beside him and then looked at Sakyamuni. "Saving this kid is a matter of the sky domain of Huaxia. It's not up to you to gossip. And where's the infant devourer?" Suddenly, the true Lord of Tao looked around and his face turned ugly. Sakra's gaze revealed a gloating expression as he said with a smile, "Perhaps, during the previous battle, this little fellow got scared and ran away? If you want to find it, you can search the extraterritorial starry sky. Maybe you can find it." "You did it on purpose?" Yu Qing had a bad temper. He stared at Sakyamuni angrily. Sakyamuni knew that he had lost the bet and that he couldn't get the infant devourer. Therefore, he let the infant devourer escape. It seemed that if he couldn't get it, he wouldn't let the enemy get it either. It was the infant devourer who ran away. "I didn't do it on purpose. Yu Qing, don't speak without evidence. Otherwise, you'll be slandering me." Sakyamuni glanced coldly at Yu Qing. Then, his figure slowly turned illusory and finally disappeared. Yu Qing stomped his foot angrily and said to the true Lord of Tao, "True Lord of Tao, I'll go look for it. Maybe I can find the infant devourer." Then, without waiting for the true Lord of Tao's reply, Yu Qing stomped his right foot and disappeared. "So fast?" Zhuowen revealed a shocked expression as he watched Yu Qing disappear into the starry sky. The legendary shrinking earth technique was indeed terrifying and powerful. With a single step, everything was trampled under his feet. After Yu Qing left, the true Lord of Tao slowly turned his head. He glanced at Zhuowen's right hand and said with a smile, "Little friend, where's the spirit ring on your hand?" Zhuowen's heart skipped a beat. His blood substitution pill was still in the spirit ring. It could be said that the blood substitution pill was the main reason why he wasn't afraid of death. Except for a few people, almost no one knew about it. Although Yang Yi had guessed that there was some secret in his spirit ring, he probably didn't think that it was related to the blood substitution pill. As for the true Lord of Tao's question, it was even more thought-provoking. However, Shi Yan knew that although the true Lord of Tao was powerful, he couldn't know everything. Just like Yen Tianwei, who had the divination sacred symbol, although she could predict a part of the future, she couldn't predict everything. There was a limit to her ability. Thus, Zhuan guessed that the true Lord of Tao didn't know that he had the blood substitution pill, which could help him die once. Moreover, Sakyamuni's thought-provoking words reminded Zhuowen that the true Lord of Tao had another purpose. At this moment, Nguyen didn't want to believe in either the true Lord of Tao or Sakyamuni. However, Nguyen could rely on the connection between him and the true Lord of Tao to settle down the countless creatures in the smoke whale. After all, the heavenly armor star had reached its end. The formation of the heavenly armor star was related to Devour. After Devour left the heavenly armor star, the star would soon become an abandoned star due to the influence of the outer space. At that time, the creatures on the heavenly armor continent would have a hard time surviving. Zhuowen said respectfully, "Senior, Junior's spirit ring was schemed against by Yang Yi and swallowed by that infant. My wife and many other saint artifacts were inside it." The true Lord of Tao interrupted Zhuowen and said indifferently, "If that's the case, let's wait for Yu Qing to find Devour. Also, it's commendable that you can comprehend the third level of Tao meaning. Your soul originally came from the earth in the heaven domain of China. Are you willing to join the heaven domain of China?" Zhuowen looked hesitant. He said in a low voice, "Senior, I'm very grateful that you can invite me to join the heaven domain of China. However, you've checked my body, haven't you? I'm afraid I can't live for long, so—" The true Lord of Tao waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Since you can comprehend Tao meaning, you're my disciple. Moreover, the heavenly armor star doesn't have Devour's energy to support it. It's about to dry up. Do you want these creatures to continue living on the heavenly armor continent on the heavenly armor star?" The true Lord of Tao glanced at Luo Yanjing not far from him and smiled. Zhuowen slightly frowned. He looked at the true Lord of Tao and said, "Senior, Are you willing to accept them? Huh, if you're my disciple and they're related to you, of course, I won't just sit and watch. At that time, I will choose a suitable planet in the heaven domain of China and let them live there, said the true Lord of Tao with a smile. Zhuowen slightly frowned. The true Lord of Tao was right. No matter what the true Lord of Tao's purpose was, the heavenly armor continent couldn't survive anymore. The only way was to move the creatures on the heavenly armor continent to another life planet. The true Lord of the heaven domain of China should be the master of the heaven domain. It shouldn't be difficult for him to take out a life planet in the heaven domain to accept the creatures on the heavenly armor continent. Okay, Zhuan said indifferently and didn't say anything else. No matter what the true Lord of Tao's purpose was, he was already a dying man. He didn't want to care about these things. Chapter 1885. 9 Sun Shuttle Now. Zhuowen's only worry was that if Yu Qing found the Devourer larva, with Yu Qing's powerful strength, he might be able to find Zhuowen's spirit ring from the Devourer larva. Once Zhuowen's life force was completely extinguished, the blood substitution pill would take effect. At that time, Yu Qing and Tai Qing would know that he had the ability to revive. Although Yu Qing and Tai Qing were almighty beings from the Huaxia heavenly domain, which was his hometown in his previous life. However, ever since he found out that Tai Qing was the one who caused his transmigration, he understood that he was just a chess piece that Tai Qing used to increase his chances of winning the bet with Sakyamuni. Zhuan couldn't see through Tai Qing and Sakyamuni's cultivation, but he knew that they were almighty beings from their respective heavenly domains. Zhuan was just an ant in front of them. Just think about it, who would care about an insignificant ant? It could be said that the current Zhuowen didn't have the qualifications to talk to existences like Tai Qing, Yu Qing, and Sakura on equal terms. The reason why Tai Qing and Yu Qing valued him so much was probably because he had comprehended 3 Tao intents consecutively. Tai Qing casually asked Zhuowen some trivial matters, then he put his hands behind his back and didn't say a word. His gaze fell on the distant starry sky. Zhuowen knew that Tai Qing was waiting for Yu Qing, so he tactfully didn't answer. Zhuowen, are you all right? At this moment, Moyan Wushang and Shiji drove the smoke whale and landed not far from Zhuowen. However, because of Tai Qing, Moyan Wushang couldn't get close to Zhuowen. He could only stop 1,000 meters away from Zhuowen in the starry sky. Zhuowen looked at the worried Moyan Wushang and gently shook his head. Wushang, don't worry, I'm fine. At this moment, Zhuowen's attitude towards Moyan Wushang was much more amiable than before, especially when he found out that Moyan Wushang had been silently doing so many things for him. This caused the ice in Zhuowen's heart to gradually melt. Initially, he only had feelings for Moyan Wushang as a confidant. There was no personal feelings because at that time, he only had Mu Qinshui in his heart. However, after Moyan Wushang took off her veil on the smoke whale and bravely revealed her feelings, Moyan Wushang realized that this seemingly strong woman had actually done so many things for him. Especially when Moyan Wushang's tears fell, Nguyen felt Moyan Wushang was Moyan Wushang. Moyan Wushang also felt the change in Zhuowen's attitude towards her. There was a touch of joy in her beautiful eyes, but there was also a trace of shyness. She sensitively felt the change in Zhuowen's attitude towards her, and her heart was jumping with joy. Zhuowen gently clenched the bloody 5 steps in his hand. He couldn't help but think of the scene where Xiao He and Cheng Huang disappeared with the Fuxi cauldron. At the same time, he also thought of the scenes with Xiao He. The tip of his nose twitched, and his eyes suddenly turned red. Kid, when did you become so weak? You're going to cry so easily? Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen's pupils shrank, and he suddenly exclaimed in his heart, Xiao He? Where are you? Are you okay? However, Zhuowen searched in his divine soul several times, but he couldn't find any trace of Xiao He. He frowned slightly, thinking that he was hallucinating. Boy, I am not in your divine soul now. I am in your hand now. It hurts a little because you are squeezing me. You should be gentler. Xiao He grimaced. Zhuowen lowered his head and looked at the bloody 5 steps. He seemed to have thought of something. He gently loosened his grip and said, You have merged with the bloody 5 steps? What happened before? Xiao He was silent for a moment, and then transmitted a message. It is not convenient to tell you now. Yu Qing seems to have returned. I will tell you slowly later. You should take care of yourself first. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air came violently. Yu Qing, with messy hair, stepped over from the starry sky far away. In an instant he landed in front of Tai Qing. Tai Qing looked at Yu Qing, whose face didn't look good. His eyes twinkled as he said, "You didn't find him?" Yu Qing looked a little depressed, sighing. "It's not easy to find him. You know that the outer space has a great suppression on the cultivators of the heaven domain. Devour was born in the outer space, so he can travel much faster than in the heaven domain. So, speaking of this, Yu Qing blushed. Although he didn't want to admit it, he couldn't find the infant Devour. Do you want me to look for him again? Yu Qing said reluctantly. True Saint furrowed his brows. He looked around the vast outer space and shook his head. The outer space is too vast. It's much bigger than the 8 heavens. Although it's full of abandoned planets, it doesn't mean that there aren't any stronger creatures. Devour is a living example. Yu Qing, with your speed, if you can't find the infant Devour, it's futile to continue searching. I'm afraid that the infant Devour's escape was arranged by the Nadi Shiva. We just need to keep an eye on the Sakyamuni domain. If the infant Devour's escape was arranged by the Sakyamuni domain, then the Nadi Shiva will secretly take him into the Sakyamuni domain. At that time, we just need to ask for an explanation. No matter how thick-skinned the Nadi Shiva is, he can't deny it. Hearing this, Yu Qing nodded slightly. Tai Qing was the wisest of the 3 pure ones in the heaven domain, so Yu Qing didn't doubt Tai Qing's words. Let's put the matter of the infant Devour aside for now. After all, Devour is just an infant. It will take a long time for him to grow. He can't threaten our heaven domain yet. As for this little guy, Yu Qing's gaze fell on Zhuan, who was beside Tai Qing, with a hint of passion in his eyes. Yu Qing didn't particularly care about the 3rd-level Dao intent. What he cared about was that this kid was able to comprehend Dao intent consecutively in such a short period of time and directly reach the 3rd level from the 1st-level Dao intent. This was something he had never seen before. Without a doubt, this kid's comprehension was the strongest he had ever seen. Tai Qing nodded and said, "His name is Jun. He was originally a member of our heaven domain, but his soul accidentally crossed into the Sky Armor continent. Now, he plans to return to our heaven domain and officially become my disciple." Yu Qing's eyes flickered, and then he laughed heartily. He stepped forward and patted Zhuowen's shoulder, saying, "So that's how it is. Then it's really fate. Since you were originally a member of the heaven domain and have comprehended 3 Dao intents consecutively, it's most suitable for you to become Tai Qing's disciple. After all, Dao intents are Tai Qing's own Dao, and he has numerous disciples. Even though many of his disciples are able to comprehend Dao intents, there aren't many that are able to comprehend 3 Dao intents. But there's never been anyone that's able to swiftly attain 3 Dao intents in such a short period of time like you." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth held a smile when he heard this, and he spoke modestly, yet he was laughing coldly without end in his heart. No matter if it was Tai Qing or Yu Qing, both of them were actually clearly aware of Zhuowen's origins. Zhuowen's crossing over was surely caused by Tai Qing, and it was only an unintentional occurrence. But under these circumstances, Zhuowen naturally couldn't point it out, and he could only play dumb. Moreover, he had to put on an appearance of being overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. He knew very well that even though 3-level Dao intents were rare, it wasn't as if a great figure like Tai Qing hadn't seen it before, and the reason Tai Qing thought highly of him was probably because he was able to comprehend 3-level Dao intents so quickly. As for what Tai Qing's goal was, Yuan didn't know. Recalling the strength of Sakyamuni and Tai Qing, a trace of helplessness rose in Zhuowen's heart. But very quickly, he became even more determined to become stronger. He didn't want to become a chess piece again. He wanted to become the person who controlled the game and completely control his own fate. However, although his life force was still flowing away, he could still live for a period of time with Tai Qing's help. He wanted to use this time to properly settle down the living beings of the heavenly armor continent. No matter what Tai Ching's goal was, Zhuan knew that with Tai Ching's Tao, he wouldn't use forceful methods, and would let nature take its course. Moreover, the living beings of the heavenly armor continent were insignificant to Tai Ching. As long as Zhuan completely settled down the people of the heavenly armor continent, he would be completely free of worries. Even if he died immediately, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid. Now, what he needed to face the most was how to escape from Devour's body after he was reborn into the spirit ring. Zhuan, follow me back to the Huaxia heavenly region. Tai Ching smiled kindly. Zhuan cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, "Senior, please remember what you promised me." Tai Ching looked at the Luo Yanjing not far away and nodded, "Of course I won't forget what I promised you. I will properly settle down the living beings of the heavenly armor continent." With that, Tai Ching waved his sleeve, and a gust of wind whistled out. The Luo Yanjing instantly swayed and was taken into Tai Ching's sleeve. "Let's go." The Huaxia heavenly region is very big, and there are many planets in it. After we enter the heavenly region, I will find a suitable planet to settle the Luo Yanjing and the living beings on it. Zhuan cupped his fists again and said, "Of course I trust you, Senior. Let's go now." Tai Ching was surprised to see Zhuan agree so quickly, but he quickly calmed down. Tai Ching waved his sleeve, and an extremely large wooden ship appeared in front of Zhuan. The wooden ship looked ordinary, but the carving on the bow was extremely sharp, like a long spear. Of course, Zhuan didn't pay too much attention to the ship itself. Instead, his eyes fell on the bottom of the wooden ship. There were 9 suns embedded at the bottom of the wooden ship. These 9 suns were not very big. Each of them was only a few dozen feet in size. However, the heat emitted from these 9 suns caused Zhuowen's face to flush red. He felt as if he was in a furnace. "Hee, little guy, this thing is Tai Ching's royal mount, called the 9 Suns Shuttle. It may look like an ordinary wooden ship, but there are 9 stars embedded at the bottom of the wooden ship. Although the size of the stars is extremely large, these 9 stars were compressed countless times by Tai Ching's great divine ability to become so small. This thing can be considered a void sky astrolabe, and its speed is definitely one of the best in the heavenly region. Since this old guy took out the 9 Suns Shuttle, he obviously values you a lot." Yu Qing laughed and glanced at Tai Ching. Obviously, he thought Tai Ching took out the 9 Suns Shuttle. Void sky astrolabe? Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He knew that above true immortal was soul formation, and he also heard that there was another realm above soul formation, and that was void sky. However, this realm was too far away and unreachable for the many beings in heavenly armor continent, so they only treated it as a legend. But now, Tai Ching took out a void sky astrolabe. Didn't that mean Tai Ching and Yu Qing were both supreme cultivators in the void sky world? Taking a deep breath, Yuan calmed down and cupped his fists at Tai Ching. "Senior, can you explain the soul formation and void sky realms to me?" Tai Ching glanced at Zhuan and smiled. "Hee, are you still calling me senior?" Chapter 1886. Divine God and True God. Tai Ching smiled and said, "Let's enter the 9 Suns Shuttle first." With that, Tai Ching landed on the deck of the 9 Suns Shuttle. Yu Qing glanced at Zhuowen and followed Tai Ching. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Without hesitation, he stepped into the 9 Suns Shuttle. Immediately, he found that the deck was burning hot. Logically speaking, Zhuowen had reached the early stage of the Divine God realm. Even if it was due to the combination of Taoist Song Long's spirit and the first mountain god's half-god body, his strength was still not to be underestimated. Normal high temperatures wouldn't have any effect on Zhuowen right now. But now, the high temperature from the deck of the 9 Suns Shuttle actually affected Zhuowen, causing his feet to feel hot and anxious. Tai Ching waved his sleeve, and a gust of wind rushed into Zhuowen's Tianling point. Then it spread throughout his body. Zhuowen only felt cool all over, and his eyes showed a comfortable expression. "Thank you, Master," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Seeing Zhuowen's neither servile nor overbearing attitude, Tai Ching showed a look of appreciation. Then he formed a seal with his right hand, and a power that Zhuowen could not grasp emerged from Tai Ching's fingertips. Then, the 9 stars inlaid at the bottom of the 9 suns shuttle burst out with dazzling light. Then, the 9 suns shuttle disappeared. Wherever it passed, it left an extremely long light mark in the dim starry sky. So fast. In just a breath's time, Zhuan found that the heavenly armor planet behind him had completely disappeared from his sight. Even his divine sense could not detect the location of the heavenly armor planet. Without a doubt, the distance that the 9 suns shuttle covered in this breath's time was far beyond the range that his divine sense could reach. Now that we've set off, I'll explain the specific division of the divine transformation realm to you. As for the virtual sky world, it's still a bit far from you, so you'd better not go and learn too much about it for now. Taiching's eyes were solemn as he said, actually, the divine transformation realm is only divided into 2 major realms, the celestial god realm and the true god realm. I think you should already know the specific division of the celestial god realm the moment you advanced to the early celestial god realm, right? Zhuan nodded and said, I do know that. The divine god realm is divided into the early stage, the middle stage, the late stage, and the pinnacle stage. Yang Yi, the avatar of the Nadi Shiva, was a late divine god. Taiching nodded and continued, the minimum requirement for becoming a soul formation cultivator is to refine a planet with life and let that planet provide you with endless astral power. This astral power can be combined with the divine soul in your mind to create powerful astral power. Speaking up to there, the Grand Pure One looked at Zhuan rather helplessly and sighed, You've become a god too hastily. Your soul didn't come from your own cultivation, and the planet you refined was actually the heavenly armor planet. The heavenly armor planet doesn't have a core. It was transformed from an abandoned planet into a planet with life because of Devour's existence. However, Devour is dead and the infant Devour is nowhere to be found. The heavenly armor planet is destined to become an abandoned planet again. Even if you're not injured and your vitality is not cut off, when the heavenly armor planet becomes an abandoned planet, you'll fall from the divine god realm to the demigod realm. It'll be difficult for you to become a celestial god for the rest of your life. Zhuan's eyes were calm. When Taoist Master Tsang Long begged him to become a celestial god, he already knew about this side effect. Taoist Master Tsang Long also knew about this side effect, which was why he said that Zhuan had to pay a great price to become a celestial god. However, if he didn't become a celestial god, no one on the heavenly armor continent would be able to resist Yang Yi. Not only would Zhuan die, but the entire heavenly armor continent would be buried with him. This was not something he wanted to see. Of course, Zhuan knew that this was only his current situation. If he died once, he would be reborn with the help of the blood-death substitution pill. At that time, his cultivation would return to the late stage of the celestial immortal realm. He might even become a celestial god in the future. Of course, Zhuan thought further than this. Since he had refined the heavenly armor planet, there was no possibility of his body being promoted again. However, Taiching still accepted him as a disciple. This was somewhat thought-provoking. Therefore, when facing Taiching, Zhuan didn't trust him unconditionally. Instead, he maintained a certain level of vigilance. Of course, this vigilance was hidden deep in his heart and he didn't show it. Above the sky god realm is the true god realm. The division of the true god realm is even less than that of the sky god realm. There are only 3 small realms. However, it is much more difficult to advance to the true god realm than the sky god realm. Our heaven region usually divides the true gods into the 1 calamity true god, 2 calamity true god, and 3 calamity true god. Zhuan frowned. It was obvious that he didn't understand the division of the true god realm. Taiching also saw Zhuan's confusion. He explained patiently, the reason why it's like this is because a true god will experience a disaster every 500 years. This disaster is caused by the rules of this galaxy. One disaster celestial god will send a thunder disaster every 500 years. This thunder disaster isn't fixed. Instead, its power will increase continuously. In other words, in the first 500 years after you become a true god, the thunder disaster will be the weakest. After every 500 years, the thunder disaster will increase continuously. Normally, the first two thunder disasters aren't very difficult for a true god. However, the third thunder disaster will be much more powerful. It's enough to kill most of the one disaster celestial gods. Therefore, the longer one stays in the true god realm, the higher the chance of dying. Of course, if you pass through the thunder disaster, your power will become more and more terrifying. Back then, I once saw a guy who stayed in the one disaster celestial god realm for 10,000 years. He challenged the three disasters celestial god with the power of a one disaster celestial god, and he killed the three disasters celestial god with one stroke. Tai Ching looked impressed. Zhuan looked grave. According to what Tai Ching said, a one disaster celestial god would experience a thunder disaster every 500 years. Moreover, the power of the thunder disaster would increase every time. The guy who stayed in the one disaster celestial god realm for 10,000 years would have experienced a total of 20 thunder disasters. It should be known that the third thunder disaster could kill most of the one disaster celestial gods. The guy who could survive 20 thunder disasters was really terrifying. Then the guy. Zhuan looked at Tai Ching and asked. Tai Ching laughed and pointed at Yu Qing. That guy is the sloppy old man Yu Qing. His temper is really stubborn. Originally, he could have directly become a two calamities real god after the second lightning calamity, but he insisted on testing his limits. The 20th lightning calamity almost killed him. Yu Qing touched his nose and shrugged. Tai Ching, don't drag me into this. It's just a matter of the past. Zhuan thought highly of Yu Qing. He killed the three disasters celestial god as a one disaster celestial god. It could be seen how terrifying his power was. Of course, it was also related to the number of thunder disasters that he passed. It seemed that the difference in the realm of real god wasn't as simple as the difference in realm. It also depended on the number of disasters that you passed. Even a one disaster celestial god would be able to kill a three disasters celestial god as long as he passed through enough thunder disasters. What a two disaster celestial god experienced wasn't thunder disaster but fire. The fire wasn't heaven fire, nor was it a normal fire. It was called Yin fire. It started from the Yongquan acupoint and went straight to the Niyuan palace. If one couldn't withstand it, their organs would turn into ashes and their limbs would rot. Countless years of hard work would turn into an illusion. The distance of the fire was the same as the thunder disaster celestial god one disaster celestial god. Its power would increase with the increase of 500 years. If you passed through it, your power would increase greatly. If you didn't, you would die and become history. As for the three disasters celestial god, what he experienced was a wind disaster. The wind wasn't from the north, south, east, west, north wind, north wind. It blew from the fontanelle to the 6 organs, Danton, 9 orifices, bones and flesh dissipated. If one couldn't avoid it, he would die. At this point, the Grand Pure One silently looked at Zhuowen, who had his head lowered in deep thought. He knew that Zhuowen needed to digest the specific division of true gods. Zhuan thought for a while and suddenly asked, Master, since celestial gods refined planets to become star god power, what about real gods? When one reaches real god, is their power also star god power? Tai Ching shook his head and said, Celestial gods refined planets and combined with their souls to become star god power. As for real gods, it's different. To become a real god, one needs to refine an entire galaxy. Anyone who can become a real god is the master of a galaxy and is in charge of a vast galaxy. Everything in this world, be it celestial gods or real gods, their lives aren't eternal. There's a limit. It's just that their lives are too long compared to the tiny creatures on the planets. Those tiny creatures mistakenly thought that celestial gods were eternal. At this point, the Grand Pure One flicked his finger and a phantom appeared above the deck. The image was of a huge life planet. This life planet was spinning rapidly, as if time had sped up countless times on this life planet. Zhuowen had witnessed the origin and decline of this life-bearing planet. In the end, this life-bearing planet had completely become an abandoned planet without any energy fluctuations. Even a planet has a limit to its lifespan. The lifespan of a celestial god is affected by the lifespan of the planet they refined. Normally, the lifespan of a normal planet with life is 100 million years. This is the lifespan of most celestial gods. I call this the planet epoch. The lifespan of a galaxy is 10 billion years. This is called the galaxy epoch. The difference between the galaxy epoch and the planet epoch is 100 times. Hearing that, Zhuowen's heart skipped a beat. He didn't expect celestial gods and real gods to have a limit to their lifespan. Zhuowen couldn't help but laugh at himself when he thought of the heavenly armor continent's saints having an eternal lifespan. He knew very well that the heavenly armor planet hadn't been formed for a long time. At most, it was a few 100,000 years to 1,000,000 years. This was too short. He guessed the lifespan of a saint to be a few million to 10 million years. As the heavenly armor planet hadn't been around for a long time, no saints had died because of their lifespan. That was why the creatures on the heavenly armor continent thought saints had an eternal lifespan. Zhuowen had been cultivating for less than 100 years. He didn't have any ancestors to guide him, so he didn't know that saints and gods had a limit to their lifespan. After all, Zhuowen was too young. Chapter 1887. Huaxia Sky Region, we're almost there. After the 9-Sun shuttle flew for 3 days, Qing Tai Qing suddenly said. Zhuowen then realized that the dark space in front of him suddenly twisted. It was as if the 9-Sun shuttle had hit an invisible barrier. This is the barrier of Huaxia Sky Region. It looks like the outer space, but it's just a trick. Qing Tai Qing came to Zhuowen's side and explained plainly. Qing Tai Qing then pointed forward with his right finger. The twisted invisible barrier turned into a circular ripple. The 9-Sun shuttle followed the ripple and went through the other side of the barrier. When the 9-Sun shuttle passed through the barrier, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. What appeared in front of him was no longer the dark space. In the distance, countless stars twinkled brightly. Zhuowen also saw an extremely vast galaxy not far away. This galaxy was formed by countless stars, like a Milky Way that stretched across the starry sky. Moreover, there was more than one galaxy that resembled the Milky Way in this vast expanse of space. There were many similar galaxies, but the shapes of the galaxies were different. Some of the galaxies were like the Milky Way, some were like the shadows of giant beasts, some were like trees, and some were like rings that kept spinning. These planets in every corner of the sky region are galaxies. Every galaxy has a different shape, and every galaxy has a corresponding true god elite in charge of managing it. Qing Tai Qing smiled and pointed at the galaxy that was closest to him. This galaxy is called the Long River Galaxy. It's a first-class galaxy. The one in charge of this galaxy is a very powerful one-disaster true god. If you don't mind, I can settle the creatures of the heavenly armor continent in this galaxy. After saying the first-class galaxy, Qing Tai Qing explained, the Huaxia Sky region divides the galaxies into 3 levels. They are the first-class galaxy, the second-class galaxy, and the third-class galaxy. The one in charge of the first-class galaxy is a one-disaster true god, the second-class galaxy is a 2-disaster true god, and the third-class galaxy is a 3-disaster true god. Of course, some true gods whose strength far exceeds their own can also be in charge of higher-level star systems within the range of their strength. Being in charge of a star system depends on one's strength realm. Zhuowen nodded slightly and said, the creatures of the heavenly armor continent are not very powerful. I hope that Master can let them settle here peacefully. It's best if they don't get bullied by others. Tai Qing smiled and said, don't worry about that. With me here, no one in the Long River system would dare to touch the people I arranged. After obtaining the Grand Pure One's promise, Wen finally relaxed. At the same time, the 9 Suns shuttle had completely entered the Long River system. The Long River galaxy was indeed vast, and there were countless planets shining brightly. Zhuowen also discovered that other than the planets with life, there were also many stars in the galaxy. These stars were the suns that emitted powerful heat. Fixed stars weren't suitable for living beings to live in. The surface of the fixed stars was covered with high-temperature magma. This type of magma was extremely terrifying, enough to kill heavenly deities. Even Zhuowen would definitely die if he stepped into this fixed star. At the center of the long river system, there was an extremely large planet. This planet was dozens of times larger than any other planet in the long river system. It looked like a crane among chickens. On this huge planet, there was an extremely luxurious palace. In the palace hall, a middle-aged man with a terrifying aura suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with shock as he quickly flew out of the palace. Outside the planet, the 9 Suns shuttle quietly stopped above the planet. Yu Qing put away the jade talisman in his hand and said, "I have already informed the person in charge of the long river system, Chi. He should be here soon." As soon as Yu Qing finished speaking, the middle-aged man who had rushed out of the palace arrived before the 9 Sun shuttle. He knelt on one knee in the starry sky and said in a deep voice, "Chi greets Lord Yu Qing and Lord Tai Qing." At this moment, Chi-Chi's body was trembling. He was extremely nervous. When Yu Qing sent him a message, his heart was in turmoil. He was inexplicably shocked. Yu Qing and Lord Tai Qing were truly important figures in the entire Huaxia Heaven realm. Normally, such people wouldn't care about a small first-grade galaxy like this. But now, such important figures had come to the long river system. Chi was both surprised and happy. Lord Tai Qing nodded and said, "You are the person in charge of the long river system?" Chi quickly said respectfully, "This little one is the person in charge of the long river system. What orders do you have for me?" Lord Tai Qing waved his sleeve and released the Luo Yen whale. He said to Chi, "This is the Luo Yen whale. It contains a small world. There are many living beings inside. It is not suitable for them to stay inside the whale. So, I want to hand them over to you." Chi looked at Mo Yen Wushang and Shiji on the Luo Yen whale. When he realized that they were only half-gods and true immortals, he was puzzled. With Chi-Chi's cultivation and vision, he could naturally see the aura of the living beings inside the Luo Yen whale. He realized that the aura of the living beings inside was very weak. It was much weaker than most of the cultivators in the long river system. Although Chi was puzzled, he didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction. He bowed and said respectfully, "Don't worry, Lord. This little one will take good care of these people." Zhuowen, who was standing beside Lord Tai Qing, suddenly said, "True God Chi, these people are my family and friends. I hope you can treat them well." Chi looked at Zhuowen and asked curiously, Although Chi could tell that Zhuowen was only in the early stage of the divine realm and there was a deathly aura surrounding him, he could tell that Zhuowen's identity was extraordinary from the fact that he was standing beside Lord Tai Qing. Hence, Chi-Chi's tone was polite. His name is Zhuowen. He is my new disciple. Everyone on the Luo Yen whale is related to him." Lord Tai Qing looked at Zhuowen deeply and explained Zhuowen's identity. He naturally knew that Zhuowen wasn't talking to Chi, but to him. Although the people on the Luo Yen whale were entrusted to Chi by Lord Tai Qing, Chi naturally wouldn't neglect them. However, if these people were close to Lord Tai Qing, it would be a lot more important. Sure enough, Chi revealed a solemn expression when he heard Chi Qing's explanation, and he hurriedly bowed to Zhuowen and said, "So it's young Master Zhua. I didn't know young Master Zhua's identity, so please forgive me. Since these people are close to young Master, I will definitely not neglect them. Master, I would like to stay in the Long River Galaxy for a while. After everyone is settled, I will leave with you." Zhuowen looked at Lord Tai Qing and said, although he didn't doubt Chi-Chi's sincerity, he was still worried. Lord Tai Qing's eyes flickered and he nodded, "Then stay here for a few days." Chi was overjoyed when he heard that. He had a good impression of Zhuowen. If other galaxies knew that Lord Tai Qing and Lord Yu Qing were staying in the Long River Galaxy for a few days, his reputation in the Long River Galaxy would soar. How could he not be grateful to Zhuowen? "Lord Zhua, this is the best planet in the Long River Galaxy. What do you think?" Above an extremely prosperous planet, Chi politely pointed at the planet and smiled at Zhuowen. After Chi settled Lord Tai Qing and Lord Yu Qing in the galaxy, he chose a planet in the galaxy at Zhuowen's request. With Lord Tai Qing and Lord Yu Qing's status, they naturally wouldn't follow him to choose. They just let Zhuowen do it himself. After choosing the planet, they planned to take Zhuowen away. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "I don't need a good planet. I need a planet that is relatively remote and complete. Chi-Chi looked at Zhuowen strangely. Usually, when choosing a planet, one would naturally choose the best one. Why did Zhuowen choose the worst one? Putting aside the fact that Zhuowen had the backing of the Grand Pure One and the Jade Pure One, just the fact that Zhuowen was a disciple of the Grand Pure One meant that as long as he chose the central planet that Chi-Chi was on, Chi-Chi would not dare to have any complaints and could only obediently give that planet to Zhuowen. However, Chi-Chi didn't think too much about it. He continued to bring Zhuowen to the edge of the galaxy. Since Zhuowen wanted a more remote planet, he could only choose from the edge of the galaxy. After searching for half a day, Zhuowen suddenly stopped above a planet. The size of this planet was surprisingly similar to Heavenly Armor Planet. Most of the surface was yellow sand, and there were a few oases. There were some mortals in plain clothes living in the oases. On the planet, there was a large continent floating. There were many cultivators on this continent, but they weren't very strong. The strongest one wasn't above demigod. This is the planet? Zhuowen asked with a smile. Chi-Chi was a little confused. Even if this planet was at the edge of the galaxy, it was still considered relatively poor. Why would Zhuowen choose such a poor planet? However, this was Zhuowen's choice after all. Chi-Chi didn't say much. Instead, he stepped on the ground with his right foot and turned into a stream of light, entering the continent on this planet. He was prepared to negotiate with the cultivators on this continent and get them to move away from this planet. The reason Zhuowen chose this planet was naturally because it was too ordinary. It was usually difficult to attract the attention of other planets. Moreover, the cultivators on the Heavenly Armor continent weren't very high in cultivation. This kind of planet was most suitable for them to live on. If he chose a planet that was too prosperous, it wouldn't be a good thing for the people on the Heavenly Armor continent. Perhaps because of Zhuowen's identity as a disciple of Lord Taiching, Chi-Chi naturally wouldn't neglect the people on the Heavenly Armor continent. However, Zhuowen knew that he wouldn't live for long. Once the news of his death spread to the Long River Galaxy, would Chi-Chi still treat the people on the Heavenly Armor continent so well? He probably wouldn't. By then, the people on the Heavenly Armor continent would be too weak. However, they occupied an extremely prosperous planet. It was inevitable that they would be coveted by other planets in the galaxy. This was why Zhuowen would rather choose a remote planet on the edge of the galaxy. Chapter 1888. Choosing a Planet Whoosh. Luo Yanjing had been following Zhuowen and Chi-Chi. When Chi-Chi flew into the continent of the Yellow Planet, Luo Yanjing flew to Zhuowen's side. At this moment, Moyan Wushang and Shiji were standing silently on Luo Yanjing's back. Behind them were Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiyao, who represented the Ryuka people, as well as Yuan Hongwen and the rest of the continent's warriors. Moyan Wushang was silent. Suddenly, she came to Zhuowen and whispered, "Are you really leaving? Can't you stay?" Zhuowen shook his head and said, "As you can see, both Taiching and Yuqing have extremely high statuses in the Huaxia Heaven domain. This Long River Galaxy is already big enough, but it is only a corner of the Huaxia Heaven domain. Since I have been accepted as a disciple by Master Taiching, I can only follow him to the core of the Heaven domain." Moyan Wushang nodded. She raised her beautiful eyes and stared at Zhuowen. "You have a strong death aura. Taiching is so strong. If you follow him, you should be able to be cured, right?" Zhuowen was stunned, and then he said with a smile, "Don't worry, Master Grand Pure One's strength is extremely formidable and possesses great ability. I'll surely not suffer any mishaps while following by his side." Zhuowen didn't say his guess. After all, it wouldn't do him or the people of the Heavenly Armor continent any good. "We are proud of you. No matter what happens to you in the future, we will come to visit you." Long Xiaotian walked up to Zhuowen, patted him on the shoulder, and said solemnly, "I hope you can visit us often." Feng Xiao grabbed Zhuowen's hands and said softly, "Son, I know you have grown up. But when you go out, you must be more careful. Remember to take care of yourself." Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao knew that Zhuowen would leave with Taiching. Although they were reluctant, they did not force him to stay. Instead, like ordinary parents who were sending off their son, they kept telling Zhuowen some trivial things. Staring at the nagging Feng Xiao, Yuan felt a trace of warmth in his heart. In a sense, Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian were not his real parents, but in name, in his identity as Zhuan of the Heavenly Armor Continent, they were indeed his parents. From the words of Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian, he could feel that kind of unreserved concern, which was the concern of a family that outsiders could not achieve. Shiji stepped forward and patted Zhuan's shoulder. He remained silent, but Zhuan could see the sadness and loneliness on Shiji's face. Shiji himself was a figure from the ancient era. 10,000 years ago, he had lost too many people he knew. In the final battle of the Heavenly Armor Continent, he had become the only surviving ancient martial art practitioner. It could be said that he was somewhat out of tune with this era. Zhuan could understand the pain in Shiji's heart, but he did not say much. He just patted Shiji's shoulder gently and looked at each other without saying anything. Next, Yuan Hongwen, Ji Chenyan, and some other young geniuses of the Central Plains who knew Zhuan met with Zhuan one by one. Most of them were extremely grateful to Zhuan. Not only did Zhuan save everyone, but he also found a new planet for them. It could be said that he had done everything he could. Chi returned once again. He smiled at Zhuan and said, "Young Master Zhua, the cultivators on this planet have completely moved away. Young Master and everyone can now enter the continent on this planet." Zhuan glanced at the continent floating on the planet and found that there were indeed no cultivators on it. In the center of the continent, there was a huge beam of light. That beam of light should be a teleportation array, and the cultivators on this continent should have been teleported away by the beam of light. "Thank you, Senior Qi." Zhuan cupped his fists and said. Chi waved his hand and said with a smile, "Young Master Zhua is too polite. Now, everyone, let's enter the continent first. Also, this continent and planet are currently ownerless. Young Master Zhua can name it. When the time comes, this planet will become Young Master Zhua's private property. No one in the galaxy will dare to touch this planet." Zhuan cupped his fists again and said with emotion, "This planet will be called the Heavenly Armor Planet, and the continent will be called the Heavenly Armor Continent." Heavenly Armor Planet? Heavenly Armor Continent? Chi muttered in a low voice. Then he praised, "Young Master Zhua, that's a good name." Zhuowen smiled faintly, ignoring Chi's obvious flattery. He said, "Senior Qi, let's talk after we enter this continent." Hearing this, Chi nodded and led everyone into the interior of the continent. The moment they entered the continent, everyone could feel that the continent contained a rich amount of immortal qi. The immortal qi on this continent was extremely rich. It was comparable to the Heavenly Armor Continent in ancient times. Cultivating on this continent filled with immortal qi made it much easier for many warriors on the Heavenly Armor Continent to advance to the Saint stage. After all, there was a huge difference between vitality and immortal qi. The energy of immortal qi was much higher than that of vitality. Everyone's eyes were filled with excitement as they entered the continent. Without a doubt, this continent was many times better than the Heavenly Armor Continent. Chi looked at the excited crowd in surprise. The immortal qi on this continent was only average in the Long River Galaxy. He was originally worried that Zhuan would be dissatisfied. Now that he saw the excitement on the faces of the people on the Heavenly Armor Continent, the worry in his heart dissipated. Of course, if Chi knew the environment of the Heavenly Armor Continent, he would understand why everyone was so excited. After Chi gave a simple introduction of the continent, he was sent away by Zhuan. From now on, this will be the new Heavenly Armor Continent. Standing on a high mountain, Zhuan looked down at the vast land and felt a sense of heroism in his heart. At this moment, the people on the Heavenly Armor Continent were scattered around the continent, preparing to reorganize their forces and troops. Ryuka was the force behind Zhuan, so they had the best location and resources on this continent. No one was dissatisfied because of this. Instead, they felt that it was natural. After all of this was because of Zhuan. It could be said that it was because of Zhuan that they had the qualifications to live on this fertile continent. Moyan Wushang stood silently behind Zhuan. She quietly looked at Zhuan's back. She did not know why, but when she looked at the back in front of her, she felt inexplicably at ease. Even if she had to stand behind Zhuowen and look at his back, she was willing to do so. The wind whistled and blew Zhuowen's long hair. Then, Zhuowen took out the bloody pentameter and gently stroked the patterns on its surface. A black light flowed around the bloody pentameter, and then the shadow of a Xiaohei dog appeared. The little black dog rubbed its arms with its paws in a very human-like manner. It looked at Zhuowen with a strange expression and roared, "Why are you so mushy? You're giving me goosebumps. Let me tell you, I don't have that kind of fetish." Zhuowen's head was filled with black lines when he saw Xiaohei spouting nonsense without changing his nature. However, he soon burst out laughing extremely heartily. "Kid, what's wrong with you?" Xiaohei was extremely dissatisfied. "I think it's good. Xiaohei, it's good that you're alive." Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and gently patted Xiaohei's head. Xiaohei stared blankly at Zhuowen. Then, it crossed its paws and turned its head away. "Why are you suddenly so mushy?" "Ha, I'm just happy. Can you tell me why you suddenly fused into the bloody pentameter? And where's Qing Huang?" Zhuowen patted his head and asked. Xiaohei's face sank and sighed. "The reason I didn't die is actually thanks to that old fox, Qing Huang. The moment the two of us entered the bloody pentameter, Qing Huang suddenly used the Fushi Cauldron's power to forcefully turn me into an artifact spirit at the last moment. Then I fused into the bloody pentameter." Zhuowen was stunned and his heart sank. He knew that Qing Huang was the artifact spirit of the Fushi Cauldron, so it was not strange for it to know the secret technique to refine an artifact spirit. That guy is a real fool. He clearly could have directly become the artifact spirit of the bloody pentameter and avoided disaster, but he didn't. Instead, he gave the opportunity to me. What a fool. Xiaohei's eyes reddened as she spoke. Zhuowen patted Xiaohei's head but did not say anything. He knew that Qing Huang had sacrificed itself to save Xiaohei. Although Xiaohei and Qing Huang usually quarreled, the two of them were very close. They could be considered bad friends on Earth in his previous life. With Qing Huang's sacrifice, it was inevitable that Xiaohei would be somewhat depressed. Zhuowen did not know what to say and could only remain silent. This is the new Heavenly Armor Continent. I think that the seniors who protected the Heavenly Armor Continent should be remembered by everyone on the continent. Zhuowen suddenly stood up and took a step forward. He took out a few of the tallest mountains on the continent. Then, Zhuowen's right hand was like a knife as he used his powerful star god energy to carve on the mountain's surface. Zhuowen's carving was very detailed and meticulous. After a while, a human figure was formed. The face of this statue was none other than the strongest person on the Heavenly Armor Continent, Songjie. Then, Zhuowen continued to carve Fushi, Dongfang, Shimin, Nangong, Beichen, Songlong, and the first mountain god. At the same time, he also carved the Fushi Cauldron and a smiling little fox on the cauldron. The Fushi Cauldron was placed at the height of Fushi's shoulder. A total of 8 stone statues stood quietly in the center of the continent. Because the stone statue was so tall that it pierced through the clouds, the entire continent could clearly see the huge stone statue that stood erect and never fell. Especially some cultivators, after seeing Zhuowen casually carving such a huge stone statue, all of them revealed looks of awe and reverence. There were also some fanatics who shouted Zhuowen's name. These were all Zhuowen's admirers. After finishing the carving, Zhuowen floated in front of the stone statues with a complicated expression. Then, Zhuowen pulled up his trousers and knelt on the ground. "If it weren't for your sacrifice, I, Zhuowen, would have died thousands of times over. Zhuowen will never forget your kindness." Chapter 1889. Leave Zhuowen's bow was like a domino effect. Everyone on the continent knelt on the ground one after another. Their eyes were filled with sincerity and respect. Although it was Zhuowen who defeated Yang Yi and Master Shi in the end, they all knew that without these people's sacrifice, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to save the entire Heavenly Armor Continent with his own strength. After bowing 3 times, Zhuowen stepped into the air and floated in front of the stone statue. Looking at the many warriors on the continent, he said in a deep voice, "Songjie was the strongest person on the Heavenly Armor Continent in the past. 10,000 years ago, He turned the tide and suppressed the sky gods to save the entire heavenly armor continent. 10,000 years later, the disaster happened again. With his broken body, he passed on his power to me and arranged many secret plans. Although he was devoured by Master Shi, we don't dare to forget his contributions. Fuxi, Dongfang, Shimin, Beichen, and Nangong, the four true immortals, in order to restrain Yang Yi, they didn't hesitate to self-detonate to buy time for us to escape. And he is Taoist Song Long and the first mountain god. They are the same person. In order to defeat Yang Yi, they sacrificed themselves to help me form the divine soul and become a sky god. In the end, I was able to defeat Yang Yi. Zhuowen's words were impassioned and full of emotion. It was very infectious. In just a few sentences, he narrated the tragic deeds of Cangjie, Fuxi, Taoist Song Long, and the others, which influenced countless warriors on the continent. In a valley in the most remote corner of the continent, Shiji walked slowly. He was in a daze like a walking corpse. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the stone statues of Cangjie, Fuxi, and the others that Zhuowen had carved. Especially when he heard Zhuowen's passionate narration, his gaze was extremely complicated. However, he soon revealed a gratified expression. After 10,000 years, I already feel tired. Thank you, Zhuowen. If it wasn't for you, everyone on the heavenly armor continent would have died an unnatural death. Shiji muttered in a low voice. Soon after, he silently entered the depths of the valley. 10,000 years of settling down had already caused Shiji to feel deeply exhausted. He decided to live in seclusion and no longer concern himself with the affairs of the world. In front of the stone statue, Zhuowen seemed to have sensed something. He glanced at the mountain valley where Shiji was and exchanged glances with Shiji from afar. He didn't say anything and only nodded at Shiji. Shiji also nodded back lightly. Although the two of them didn't speak, they understood each other's intentions. Zhuowen looked at the stone statues of Cangjie, Fuxi, and the others again. He whispered to himself, although Yang Yi is dead, he is just a doppelganger of Sakyamuni. If I, Zhuowen, ascend to the virtual sky one day, I will definitely kill Sakyamuni and sacrifice Sakyamuni to you. In the following period of time, Zhuowen remained in the new heavenly armor continent. During this period of time, he often spent time with his parents, grandfather, and other relatives. He also often visited Moyan Wushang, Yuan Hongwen, and the others. Although everyone got along well and happily, there was a faint trace of sadness in this happiness. They all knew that Zhuowen wouldn't stay on this continent for long. After a while, Zhuowen would be summoned by Taiching and leave the Long River Galaxy. On this day, the sun was shining brightly. In a huge courtyard, Zhuowen, Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Long Xiangding, and other close Ryuka clansmen were sitting together. Moyan Wushang sat not far from Zhuowen and silently looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen chatted and laughed with everyone. Everyone laughed from time to time. It was a harmonious scene. Suddenly, Zhuowen's face changed slightly and his eyes became gloomy. When everyone saw Zhuowen's expression, the smiles on their faces froze. Zhuowen stood up silently and cupped his fist to everyone. He said, "Everyone, I should go. Child, be careful along the way. Father and mother are not strong enough to protect you. In the future, everything will depend on you. If you have the chance, come back more often." Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao stood up and sighed. The rest of the people also stood up. Although they were extremely reluctant, they also knew that the person who took Zhuowen away this time was the great Taiching. Moyan Wushang bit her lower lip and stood up. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen and said, "Will you come back?" Zhuowen turned to look at Moyan Wushang and said with a smile, "Yes, I will definitely come back." Hearing this, Moyan Wushang smiled and said in a low voice, "That's good. I will wait for you to come back." Zhuowen's eyes showed a trace of hesitation. He turned around and faced Moyan Wushang in front of him. He found that the corners of Moyan Wushang's eyes had unknowingly welled up with tears. Bang! Suddenly, Zhuowen felt a fragrant wind. Then, Moyan Wushang threw herself into his arms. "You must come back. We are all waiting for you here." A young and inexperienced voice slowly sounded beside Zhuowen's ear. Soon after, the fragrant wind suddenly left his embrace. Zhuan silently looked at Moyan Wushang, who left. His eyes showed a touch of sadness. In his mind, Mu Qinshue's figure appeared. This little girl has deep feelings for you. Can't you feel it? Xiao Hei's voice slowly sounded. Zhuan replied with a wry smile, I am not blind. How can I not see it? But now, I just want to take my spiritual ring out of Devour's body. Let's talk about other things later. Moreover, Tai Ching is unfathomable. I can't guess what he is thinking. Xiao Hei was silent. Then, she continued, Devour's body has escaped to the depths of the starry sky. Even Yu Qing can't find it. How can you find it? Unless you use the blood substitution pill to be reborn in the spiritual ring. But that is simply seeking your own death. Zhuan's eyes were calm. He said, That's what I am thinking. This time, I will follow Tai Ching to the heavenly domain of Huaxia. I will make ample preparations for my rebirth in the spiritual ring. There are countless experts in the heavenly domain of Huaxia. I am afraid that there must be many secret techniques that are much more advanced than those in the heavenly armor continent. Secret techniques? Xiao Hei seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but exclaim. I plan to possess the young devourer. When the spirit ring was devoured by the young devourer, I had already thought of this method. However, I don't have any experience in possessing a young devourer, nor have I come in contact with any secret techniques in this area. So, I'm not sure. But now that I've become Tai Ching's disciple, no matter why he took me in as his disciple, I should be able to touch the top secret techniques and supernatural powers in the heavenly domain of Huaxia. Once I touch those powerful secret techniques and supernatural powers, I think that after my rebirth, I will be able to deal with Devour's body and seize it. Zhuan said resolutely. Xiao Hei dropped her jaw in surprise. She had to admit that Zhuan's decision was too risky. Although Devour's young body hadn't reached adulthood, it was still Devour's descendant. How could such a powerful creature be seized so easily? Xiao Hei, don't worry. I still have Devour's heaven-devouring eye. After my rebirth, it will grow out from my glabella. At that time, with the heaven-devouring eye, I will be more confident. That's why I made this decision, said Zhuan with a smile. If you've made up your mind, I can't say anything. I just hope that you will be careful, said Xiao Hei in a low voice. Zhuan nodded, and then he said, Xiao Hei, I'll leave Bloodsplatter 5 steps on this continent for now. I'll return once I've truly seized the body of an infant and devoured it. At that time, I'll take you and the entire planet with me. Then, Zhuan handed the blood-splashing 5 steps to Long Xiaotian and then left the new heavenly armor star. Outside the central planet of the Long River Galaxy, Tai Ching and Yu Qing stood side by side, while Qi Qi hovered respectfully behind them. Swoosh! A long rainbow zoomed over, revealing Zhuan's figure. Seeing Zhuan, Tai Ching and Yu Qing smiled. Tai Ching took out the 9 Suns shuttle and said, Let's go. We've settled your fellows. It's time to return to the heaven territory with us. Zhuan nodded and then got into the 9 Suns shuttle. Tai Ching then activated the 9 Suns shuttle and disappeared from the Long River Galaxy. In the cold and dark outer space, countless abandoned planets floated in the vast space. On one of the dark silver abandoned planets, a giant exotic beast was lying dormant. This exotic beast had 12 horns on its head. Its face was ferocious, and its scales had a metallic luster. At first glance, it looked like a fighting machine. This exotic beast was Devour's young body, which had sneakily escaped from the battlefield in the heavenly armor star. After Devour had run away, it hadn't stopped to rest, heading deep into the starry sky. It had been several months before it stopped and rested on this abandoned star. Since Devour was born, it hadn't absorbed enough energy from the adult Devour. Therefore, its strength was extremely low, only at the demigod realm. Moreover, Devour had just gone through a great battle, so it had sustained many injuries. Therefore, it was extremely weak at this moment. Devour vigilantly observed this huge abandoned planet. After confirming that there was no danger on this planet, it kept digging its claws on the surface of the planet, gradually going deeper into the planet. When it reached the bottom of the abandoned planet, it dug a huge hole in the depths. Then, It lay quietly in the hole and fell into a deep sleep. Devour was a race that relied on devouring planets to obtain energy. However, in the outer space, almost all the planets were abandoned, without any energy. To Devour, these planets were like garbage, and they had no effect on its injuries. Besides, Devour's other method of recovery was to sleep. It used its sleep to reduce the consumption of energy, and the energy it saved could be used to heal its injuries. The infant Devour planned to use its deep sleep to slowly recover from its injuries. It planned to leave this abandoned star after its injuries were completely healed. Deep inside Devour's body, a blood-red skeleton-like monster was sitting cross-legged in the blood-red meat wall near its stomach. This blood-red monster wore a silver ring on its finger. Phew! The monster finally stopped wriggling. Fuck. Luckily I, the blood immortal, am wise. The moment I fell into the monster's stomach, I immediately hid in the meat wall. Otherwise, I would have been digested by the monster. Chapter 1890. SS Taiching Immortal Realm. Originally, the infant Devour's body wasn't suitable for normal warriors to live in. Normally, warriors who were swallowed into its body would be corroded by its powerful blood energy, and planets that were swallowed into its body would be taken into another space similar to the starry sky. After the blood immortal was swallowed into the infant Devour's body, she was naturally considered as food and was sent into its stomach. Originally, the powerful blood energy in Devour's body was enough to kill most creatures. But the blood immortal was different. She cultivated blood energy, and after entering the infant Devour's body, not only did she not feel uncomfortable, but her cultivation also improved, and she directly became a sky immortal. The surging blood energy in the infant Devour's body was too suitable for the blood immortal to live in, but it was only limited to this meat wall that she found. Because the infant Devour's body was full of danger, just the acid in its stomach under the meat wall was enough to corrode the blood immortal into nothingness. And before the infant Devour fell asleep, its meat wall kept wriggling, which made the blood immortal suffer a lot. Now that the wriggling finally stopped, the blood immortal let out a heartfelt sigh of relief. How long do I have to stay in this godforsaken place? It's so lonely. The blood immortal scratched her head in irritation. Although the blood power here was indeed suitable for her to cultivate, and it also increased her cultivation speed, the blood immortal was already irritated by the fact that she could only stay in this small place for a few months. Damn it, I shouldn't have agreed to keep Zhuowen's spirit ring. Now that I'm in this state, it's all because of that Jun. The blood immortal grabbed the spirit ring on her hand and was about to throw it away, but she didn't do so in the end. Damn it, why isn't Zhuowen dead yet? When he dies, he can be reborn in this spirit ring, and then I can have someone to talk to? No, I can't throw this spirit ring away. I have to let that guy feel the harsh environment inside the infant Devour's body. Putting away the spirit ring again, the blood immortal sat cross-legged in the meat wall angrily to cultivate her blood energy, and at the same time, she hoped that Zhuowen would quickly die and be reborn. Countless galaxies shuttled under the 9-sun shuttle. Zhuowen stood on the deck, silently looking at the endless galaxies below the shuttle, and he didn't have the surprise and curiosity he had in the beginning. Along the way, he had seen too many galaxies. Now, he was no longer interested in the galaxies he had passed through. However, the vastness of the heaven domain was beyond Zhuowen's. With the 9's sun shuttle, they still hadn't reached the center of the sky Taichings and the others. As for how the Grand Pure One and Jade Pure One had only spent a short amount of time to reach outer space, it was naturally because they had used warp with all their strength. Was Tai and Yuqing and Yuqing was Yu, S-U and you was that, Tu and Yuta was Yu, was and U spaces and Yudo to used to U to U to Yut. Ts. S2 Zhuowen lifted his eyelids and suddenly saw 3 enormous star regions in front of the 9 suns shuttle in the distance. These 3 star domains were made up of countless galaxies, and this scene shocked Zhuowen. Along the way, he saw only individual galaxies. Moreover, there was a considerable distance between each galaxy. However, the 3 star domains in front of him were different. Each star domain was made up of distinct galaxies, and countless stars twinkled, embellishing the complexity and uniqueness of these star domains. These 3 star domains had different appearances, and one of them was made up of countless galaxies that formed the shape of a huge heavenly palace. This huge heavenly palace emitted an unimaginable pressure. Another star domain was completely red, and most of the stars in this star domain were stars that emitted terrifying heat. Compared to the terrifying number of stars, there were far fewer planets with life in this star field. They only took up about 1/3 of the total star field. Moreover, when these star systems were grouped together, their shape was like a crimson land. On this crimson land, flames burned endlessly. The last star domain was made up of countless galaxies made up of planets with life. Its appearance was like fog, as if it was surrounded by clouds and mist. It was like a paradise on Earth, beautiful and magnificent. These 3 star domains looked like they were put together, but they weren't. They were arranged in a triangle in 3 directions and complemented each other. Yuan looked at these 3 star domains in shock, and his heart pounded. It was his first time seeing such a majestic star domain. Taiqing glanced at Yuan and said with a smile, "These 3 star domains are where the 3 pure ones of Taoism are. The huge heavenly palace is called the Qingwei Heavenly Palace, and it's the territory of Yuqing. And that star region that is like a barren land is the territory of the Prime Clear. It is called the Prime Clear Barren Land. The Prime Clear is obsessed with refining weapons, so there are many kinds of stars in their territory. They use the powerful heat of the stars to forge powerful weapons. As for the last star domain, it's where I live, and it's called the Taiqing Celestial Realm." Only when he heard this did Yuan find out that these 3 regions were actually the residences of the Sky Dao sect, Jade Dao sect, and the Prime Dao sect that he'd never met. Yuan had heard about the 3 pure ones in legends in his previous life. The 3 pure ones were the ancestors of Taoism, and they were the Yuqing Yuanshi Heavenly Lord, the Taiqing Daoed Heavenly Lord, and the Shangqing Lingbao Heavenly Lord. It could be said that the 3 pure ones were extremely famous on Earth in his previous life, and they were once crowned as supreme gods by the ancients. Now, Yuan saw the Yuqing and Taiqing of the 3 pure ones with his own eyes. It could be said that this was unbelievable in his previous life, but now, Yuan's heart was as still as water, and he was neither sad nor happy. "Master, I want to go to my previous life's hometown, Earth, and take a look." Yuan suddenly looked at Taiqing. Taiqing took a deep look at Yuan and said indifferently, "Yuan, although I was the one who facilitated your transmigration, your death wasn't caused by me. It can only be said that you happened to have the Fushi cauldron at that time, and you were hunted to death. At that time, I happened to need a candidate, so I transferred your soul to the Heavenly Armor Continent." Yuan looked at Taiqing in surprise. Based on his understanding of Taiqing rarely explained what he did, but this guy actually took the initiative to explain to Yuan, which really puzzled Yuqing. Yuan nodded and said in a deep voice, "Master, don't worry. I know this. I'm returning to Earth this time to see my old friends and family from my previous life, to resolve my final remnant thoughts, and also to take revenge for my previous life's murder, so that my mind can be clear." Taiqing was silent for a moment, then he frowned and said, "Earth is a mortal world under the jurisdiction of the Huaxia continent. Other than the manager of the mortal world, other cultivators are not allowed to enter. I know Master will definitely have a way." Yuan stared at Taiqing. "Earth and its companion, the Huaxia continent, are in my Taiqing Wonderland star field. If you want to enter Earth to resolve your remnant thoughts, it's not impossible, but before that, I need to discuss something with you." Taiqing suddenly said. Yuan's eyes narrowed, and he felt a little uneasy. He asked, "What is it?" Taiqing smiled mysteriously and said, "We'll talk about this when you return from Earth." Then, Taiqing looked at Yuqing and said, "Yuqing, do you want to come to my Taiqing Wonderland?" "I couldn't ask for more." Yuqing laughed. Taiqing nodded and said, "Then let's enter the Taiqing Wonderland first. Yuan, are you going to Earth now?" Yuan still nodded. Taiqing didn't waste any time and led the way. Under the 9 Suns shuttle's guidance, the group instantly entered the Taiqing Wonderland. The 9 Suns shuttle was extremely fast, and they instantly arrived at a planet that looked like a blue gem. Yuan's eyes fell on the blue planet, and he was slightly moved, but he quickly regained his composure. Then, his eyes turned slightly and landed on a continent that was floating above Earth. When he first comprehended the Tao will, his divine consciousness had descended to Earth when he traced the origin. At that time, his cultivation wasn't high, so he couldn't see through the restriction on the surface of the Huaxia continent. But now, his cultivation had reached the early stage of the heavenly god realm, so he could easily see the Huaxia continent. The moment the Nine Suns shuttle arrived outside Earth, countless sword lights suddenly swept out from the Huaxia continent. Upon closer inspection, these sword lights were actually a group of cultivators flying over on flying swords. At the head of this group of cultivators was an old man with white hair and beard. Among this group of cultivators, Jun even saw the middle-aged man in white who was flying on a sword when his divine consciousness descended to Earth. This middle-aged man followed behind him respectfully. Although he also saw Zhuowen, he didn't recognize Zhuowen. After all, Yun had only descended with his divine consciousness, and he hadn't arrived on Earth himself. How could this middle-aged man recognize Zhuowen? Sect Master of Mount Buzhou, Yu Zhe, greets Supremacy Taiqing and Supremacy Yuqing. The white-haired old man came forward, bowed, and said loudly. Many of the cultivators behind the old man also paid their respects to Taiqing and Yuqing. Taiqing nodded slightly, then pointed at Zhuowen beside him and said, "Yu Zhe, this is my disciple, Jin. He has some matters to take care of on Earth. I hope you can let him in for a while." Yu Zhe frowned slightly. He glanced at Zhuowen, who was beside Taiqing, with a serious look in his eyes. Being able to become the disciple of an existence like Taiqing, he naturally did not dare to be careless, but he soon looked troubled. "Supremacy, your disciple is already a heavenly god. If he enters Earth with such a cultivation, he'll be devoured by the laws of Earth. He's not recognized by Earth," Yu Zhe said in a deep voice. Chapter 1891. A son wants to raise, this clone of mine should be qualified to enter Earth, right? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Yu Zhe frowned, but he still nodded in the end. This clone of yours is qualified, but there are differences between mortals and immortals. Even this clone of yours is too powerful for mortals, so once you enter Earth, you can't do as you please. Otherwise, our Huaxia continent will step in to stop you. Zhuowen nodded. I'm only going to Earth to resolve my lingering thoughts. Also, I want to destroy an organization. I hope Sect Master Yu Zhe will allow me to do so. An organization? Yu Zhe frowned. What kind of organization? I only know that this organization is called the Fog Organization back on Earth. Back then, I was an Earthling, but I was killed by the Fog Organization's assassins. Hun stopped abruptly. He knew that there were some things that didn't need to be said too clearly. He had already stated his purpose, so Yu Zhe should be able to understand. Although Yu Zhe was a little confused as to why Zhuowen's previous life was an Earthling, he couldn't say anything since he had already stated his reason. After all, Zhuowen had the backing of the Taiqing sect, the ruler of the sky domain. Even if he didn't agree, he could only make an exception this once. Thinking of this, Yu Zhe said to a middle-aged man behind him, "Konggu, you've always been in charge of Earth. Do you know of the Fog Organization on Earth?" The middle-aged man called Konggu was the cultivator on a flying sword that Zhuowen had met when his consciousness descended on Earth. When he heard Yu Zhe's question, he quickly came before Yu Zhe and said in a deep voice, "There is such an organization, and this organization has done many shady things on Earth. However, due to the differences between mortals and immortals, this disciple has never bothered with them." Hearing this, Yu Zhe understood why Zhuowen wanted to eliminate this organization. He nodded and said to Zhuowen, "Young Master Zhuowen, we allow you to deal with the Fog Organization, but I hope you won't harm the innocent. There's one more thing. You can't stay on Earth for more than 3 days. Once 3 days have passed, you must leave." "I understand." Zhuowen nodded. "Konggu, take young Master Zhuo to Earth," Yu Zhe instructed. Soon after, Konggu cupped his fists toward Zhuowen and said, "Young Master Zhuo, please follow me." With that, Konggu turned into a stream of light and entered Earth. Zhuowen's clone followed closely behind. Master, can you wait for 3 days? On the Nine Suns shuttle, Zhuowen's main body said to Tai Qing beside him. Tai Ran smiled faintly and said, "It's only 3 days. I'll wait with you." After Zhuon expressed his gratitude, he sat down cross-legged on the deck of the Nine Sun shuttle. As for Yu Zhe and the others, they stood outside the Nine Sun shuttle respectfully. Without Taiching's permission, they didn't dare to leave. In the blue sky, 2 shadows instantly cut through the void and landed in the clouds. Zhuon looked down at the countless skyscrapers below with nostalgia in his eyes. He had lived on the heavenly armor continent for more than 10 years. In other words, more than 10 years had passed on Earth. Brother Kong, I hope you can help me find the base of the dense fog organization. I still have some matters to attend to. Once you find the base of the dense fog organization, you can inform me. With that, Yuan cupped his fists towards Kong Gu and left silently, entering the continent below the clouds. Kong Gu looked at Zhuowen's back in confusion and muttered, "This person gives me a very familiar feeling. It's as if I've seen him somewhere before. But when I think about it carefully, I can't remember where." Forget it. Maybe it's just my imagination. I'll go look for the dense fog organization first. They change their base frequently. Although I noticed this organization back then, I didn't pay much attention to it. Now, I need to investigate it seriously. With that, Kong Gu stepped on his sword and disappeared into the clouds. Zhuon slowly made his way through the bustling streets. He was like a lonely traveler, out of tune with this busy world. Zhuo Wen's powerful divine senses swept across the entire continent. In his divine senses, he discovered many familiar faces from his previous life. All of them were already middle-aged, and the children were already over 10 years old. Zhuowen smiled, but he did not take the initiative to greet these familiar faces from his previous life, nor did he disturb their lives. He knew very well that these people had completely forgotten Zhuowen after more than 10 years. There was no need for him to appear in their lives. Zhuon kicked off with his right foot and disappeared from the bustling streets. When he reappeared, he was already in a seaside town. Feeling the salty sea breeze, Zhuon revealed a trace of warmth on his face. His gaze followed the sea breeze and fell on an extremely inconspicuous house in the town. For the first time, there was a trace of change in his gaze. Within this change, there was a trace of deep guilt. Zhuon landed on the roof of the house and looked at the couple drying fish in the courtyard. He suddenly felt a lump in his throat. The couple's hair was already graying, and their waists were hunched. Traces of wrinkles had appeared on their faces due to the passage of time. Zhuon quietly looked at the couple for a very long time. Finally, after the couple finished drying the fish, they leaned against each other and wanted to enter the house. The woman, who was over 50 years old, seemed to sense something. She raised her head and looked at the roof of the house. Her eyes met with Zhuowen's. At this moment, Zhuowen's pupils constricted to the extreme. His heart pounded rapidly, and the guilt in his eyes became even more intense. He choked with sobs as he called out softly, "Mother, Ruoshua, what's wrong?" The hunched man looked at the roof that the woman was looking at with some surprise. When he realized that there was nothing on the roof, his eyes were filled with confusion. Tears flowed from the corner of the woman's eyes. She choked with sobs and said, "I think I saw Wen'er just now." The man hugged the woman tightly in his arms and gently patted her back. He sighed and said, "Ruoshua, Wen'er died more than 10 years ago. Don't think too much about it. Boo-hoo, Wen'er's death was not worth it. Even now, we still don't know who the murderer is. The police are also vague about Wen'er's death. Perhaps the murderer is still at large. Thinking of this, my heart hurts." The woman leaned on the man's chest and choked with sobs. In the corner of the house, Zhuon quietly leaned against the wall. He listened to the conversation between the woman and the man. His eyes suddenly turned red, and the sourness in his nose became even more intense. A trace of pain and helplessness rose in his heart. In this world, perhaps only my parents still miss me, but my identity is already dead. Thinking back to how his soul was used by Taiching to travel to the heavenly armor continent after his death, Zhuon realized that his identity on Earth was already a dead person. A child wants to raise, but his parents are no longer around. Yuan slowly raised his head and stared at the blue sky. He said firmly, "But I don't want this to happen. I hope that I can fulfill my last filial duty." A powerful space-time power surged out of Zhuowen's body. Then this space-time power enveloped the small town. At this moment, the entire town seemed to have fallen into a torrent of time. Beside the Nine Suns shuttle, Yuzhe sensed something and said with a gloomy expression, "Young Master Zhuo, you're actually using the law of time in the mortal world? I only need to reverse 50 years of time. After 50 years, I will restore the time of that town," Zhuowen's original body said calmly. Yuzhe frowned and looked at Tai Ching. He saw Tai Ching smiling but didn't say anything. Yuzhe could only sigh and remain silent. "I'm back. I've graduated from university and I've brought my girlfriend. Dad, Mom, let me support this family in the future. You've worked hard for the past 20 years. Enjoy your old age. Dad, Mom married? How about I give birth to a fair and clean grandson for you? Dad, Mom, your grandson has grown up. I'll take good care of you in the future." Dad, Mom, time reversed and moved forward again. The events of more than a decade ago seemed to be reconstructed. Zhuan was like a bystander, quietly watching everything that had happened in the past 50 years. He saw the peaceful smiles on his parents' faces. Everything was so harmonious. In the end, Zhuan knelt in front of the two tombstones and kowtowed heavily. His body trembled uncontrollably as he sobbed. After kowtowing 3 times, time slowly reversed and returned to the scene of the woman and the man leaning against each other in the courtyard. "Rua Xue, I seem to have had a dream just now. I dreamed that Winner came back. He even got married and gave birth to a grandson for us." The man suddenly trembled emotionally. The woman's face flushed red. She nodded heavily and said, "I dreamed about it too. I'm sure I saw Winner just now. He must have told us in the dream to complete what he couldn't do back then. It must have been when..." With that, the woman knelt on the ground. The man followed suit. The two of them put their palms together and silently prayed for Zhuan in their hearts. Zhuan slowly rose into the air. With a wave of his sleeve, a gentle energy silently flowed into the woman and the man's bodies. This energy could completely improve their bodies and heal all their hidden injuries. If there were no accidents, the woman and the man would have no problem living until they were 100 years old. Moreover, Zhuan had also changed their fortunes. At least for the rest of their lives, the two of them would be healthy. Although they wouldn't be rich, they would at least live a well-off life in the future. "Father, Mother, I'm unfilial. This is all I can do for you now." Zhuan slowly rose into the air. He quietly looked at the two figures that were getting smaller and smaller. The corners of his mouth were full of bitterness. "Brother Zhuo, you're no longer people of the same world as them. The lifespan of mortals is only a few decades. Most of them can't live past 100 years. They're destined to leave you. This is the law of nature. It's also the difference between immortals and mortals in our Huaxia mainland." A sword light swept over. Konggu landed not far from Zhuan on his sword. He naturally saw everything that Zhuan had done and sighed with emotion. "Brother Kong, how long have you been cultivating?" Zhuan suddenly looked at Konggu and asked. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.